Chapter 585. Very good. Fox Demon's expression changed as she shouted, "Prepare to attack." With that order, the cultivators of Fox Immortal Valley silently circulated their spirit chi and prepared for battle. Roar! A roar suddenly came from the depths of the mountains, startling countless birds. The roar came from at least 20 to 30 kilometers away, but it still gave people a great sense of oppression. This was the might of an overlord-level monster beast. After a while, a few streaks of light appeared in front of everyone's eyes. It was Zhou Yuntian and the others who had left earlier. More than 10 of them went, but only 7 returned. The rest were nowhere to be seen. It was easy to imagine what happened to them. There was a tall figure chasing after them like a maggot. That figure couldn't fly and could only jump up and down on the ground. However, its speed was so fast that it wasn't any slower than Zhou Yuntian and the others. Every time it landed, it would cause the earth to shake and the mountains to shake. The people who were being chased had panicked looks on their faces. Each of them used all their strength to increase their speed to the limit, but they still couldn't shake off the pursuer. Lu Yi looked over and found that the black figure was a giant ape covered in red fur. It was the overlord-level monster beast marked on the map, the giant berserk ape. It was unknown what Zhou Yuntian and the others had done to it, but the giant berserk ape's eyes were filled with malevolence. Its cold, murderous intent seemed to have materialized, causing the cultivators in front to feel as if they had fallen into an eternal ice cave. The giant berserk ape jumped up high again and suddenly reached out with its hand, grabbing a cultivator at the back of the group. Although Lu Yi wasn't familiar with that cultivator, he had seen him a few times in Fox Immortal Valley and knew that he was an 8th Order cultivator. But at this moment, this 8th Order Cloud River Realm cultivator, who could be considered a powerhouse in the entire Cloud River battlefield, was being held in the palm of the giant berserk ape like a little chick. Help! That person's eyes were filled with fear as he raised his hand to call for help. As soon as his voice fell, the giant berserk ape's hand tightened and with a bang, his entire body exploded into a rain of blood, not even leaving behind a corpse. This scene was imprinted into the eyes of all the cultivators waiting here, and it caused their eyelids to twitch while their hearts were filled with astonishment. Before today's operation, the Fox Demon had already informed them of the operation's objectives. However, even though they were all mentally prepared to sacrifice their lives for the Fox Demon, they still felt a chill from the bottom of their hearts when they saw this scene. An uncontrollable fear spread through their bodies. Many cultivators instinctively retreated, wondering in their hearts, could they really kill such a terrifying existence? An 8th Order Cloud River Realm cultivator had been crushed to death with a single slap. Such a visual impact caused all of their original complacency to melt like snowflakes under the scorching sun. No one would feel safe against such a person. What are you afraid of? Today, either it dies or you die. No one is allowed to retreat. The Fox Demon opened her plump red lips and spat out her bone-chilling words. As soon as she spoke, the cultivators stopped retreating. The fear on their faces slowly disappeared and was replaced by a look of determination. The soul mystic technique planted by the Fox Demon had taken effect. To the cultivators of Fox Immortal Valley, the Fox Demon's words were irresistible orders. Someone roared, "For Senior, we must kill this bastard today." The crowd was roused, "We must kill this bastard." For a moment, their fighting spirit soared. The distance of 20 kilometers was covered in a flash. Zhou Yuntian and the others had fled back in a sorry state. They had finally survived, and behind them was the giant berserk ape. Attack! Following the Fox Demon's order, the scattered cultivators attacked together. For a moment, the spiritual energy in the area became chaotic. The might of many imperial artifacts and techniques covered the sky as they surged towards the giant berserk ape. In an instant, the area around it turned into a whirlpool of death. When the cultivators of Fox Immortal Valley attacked, the giant berserk ape had just leapt into the air. Following the explosion of many Imperial artifacts and techniques, the giant ape's huge body was directly blasted down and heavily smashed into the ground. The ground cracked and dust flew. Roar! The giant ape stood up in a sorry state and roared. Visible waves of air swept forward, and the trees near it were uprooted as if they were hit by a tornado. However, it was met with even more attacks from Imperial equipment and spells. Multicolored light blossomed, rendering the entire area gorgeous and colorful. Thud, 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 thud. That was the sound of the attacks hitting the giant raging ape. The giant ape, which was 30 feet tall, was actually forced to stagger back under such continuous attacks. Its body was swaying uncontrollably. Even if they lost a few people, there were still about 80 cultivators on Fox Immortal Valley's side. With such a force gathered together, how terrifying was it? For a moment, they actually suppressed the giant berserk ape's power. Seeing this scene, the cultivators of Fox Immortal Valley were overjoyed. Many of them suddenly realized that this overlord-level demonic beast didn't seem to be much. It wasn't as terrifying as they imagined, so they attacked even more fiercely. Among all the cultivators, only Lu Yi and Xie Yunhan didn't participate in the siege of the giant berserk ape. The two of them were responsible for presiding over the formation that was set up in advance, so they flew in the air on their spirit artifacts. Looking at the huge figure that was constantly retreating, wrapped in the light of Imperial artifacts and techniques, Lu Yi looked at the fox demon standing in the crowd. There was no joy on the fox demon's face. Instead, her expression was solemn. This made Lu Ye's heart sink. The situation wasn't as optimistic as it seemed. In the entire Fox Immortal Valley, the fox demon was the one who understood the strength of the giant berserk ape the best. Her expression was undoubtedly telling. However, under such a situation, Lu Yi couldn't think of any way that the giant berserk ape could turn the situation around. With more than 80 cultivators attacking together, even if it was an overlord-level demonic beast, what could it do? Just as he was thinking about this, another earth-shaking roar came from the giant berserk ape. It seemed that because it was attacked, the overlord-level demonic beast was completely enraged. This roar was even stronger than before. When the air wave swept out, Lu Yi, who was flying on his artifact, couldn't help but sway. Looking forward, Lu Ye's eyelids twitched. In the center of the multicolored light and chaotic spiritual energy, a dazzling red light suddenly expanded like a sun. A terrifying demonic essence swept out in all directions. In the cultivators' camp, cries of alarm sounded. At this moment, the connection between themselves and their Imperial artifacts was severed. A series of clanging sounds rang out. Imperial artifacts of different shapes fell beside the giant berserk ape. Looking at the luster of those Imperial artifacts, it was obvious that they had lost their spirituality. This was caused by the impact of the overlord-level demonic beast's demonic essence. In the next moment, the giant berserk ape, which was originally suppressed, suddenly leaped high and broke through the heavy blockade. Its tall and burly figure carried an indescribable sense of oppression as it landed at the densest part of the crowd. At this moment, Lu Ye's pupils shrank. Without the interference of the many artifacts and spells, the giant raging ape's current state was clear at a glance. What shocked Lu Yi was that after enduring the indiscriminate bombardment of so many cultivators for more than 10 breaths, the giant raging ape was actually not injured at all. Even the red fur on its body was not damaged in the slightest. A dense and solid demonic essence wrapped around the surface of its body, forming an impenetrable defense that was as solid as gold. Lu Yi finally understood why the fox demon's expression was so serious. The overlord-level demonic beast's strength was actually stronger than he expected. In that situation, even a cultivator who had just advanced to the true lake stage wouldn't be unscathed. However, the giant berserk ape wasn't injured at all. Lu Yi still didn't know how strong it was, but this kind of defense was undoubtedly much more terrifying than some early-stage true lake stage cultivators. Without breaking the demonic essence on its body, there was no way to injure it. If he didn't even have the ability to injure it, how could he kill it? Lu Yi secretly rejoiced. Fortunately, he didn't tamper with the array and used all his strength. Otherwise, he might really be in trouble this time. Amidst the cries of alarm, the giant berserk ape landed. The ground trembled. With the ape at the center, cracks spread out like a spider web. Some cultivators who reacted quickly had already escaped. However, there were still a few cultivators who didn't react quickly enough. They only thought of running when the giant berserk ape landed in front of them. However, it was already too late. The giant berserk ape reached out and grabbed the cultivator closest to it. Amidst the cultivator's terrified cries of despair, the giant berserk ape smashed him to the ground. The cries of despair stopped abruptly. There were traces of blood and flesh on the ground. The giant berserk ape sprinted a few more steps and caught up with another cultivator. Its huge hand covered the sky and slapped down. That cultivator didn't even have the chance to make a sound before he was smashed into meat paste. It turned around and let out a short roar. With an agility that no one could understand, it scooped up a third cultivator. Then, it opened its bloody mouth and bit down. Blood splattered. The upper half of the cultivator's body disappeared. The giant berserk ape didn't chase after the fleeing cultivators. It opened its mouth and spat out the upper half of the cultivator's body. The corner of its mouth was stained with blood. It raised its head and puffed out its chest. Then, it raised its hands and slapped its chest. Pring pring pring, the dull sound was like a war hammer hitting a war drum. It was so loud that it made people's eardrums tremble. Accompanied by the slapping sound, it let out a furious roar, displaying the might of an overlord-level demonic beast. In midair, Lu Yi waved the array flag in his hand. The giant berserk ape vaguely sensed it. However, before it could react, violent spiritual energy suddenly surged around it. Then, a dazzling flame shot up into the sky, turning a large area into a purgatory. A roar sounded and spread in all directions. The flame wrapped around the giant berserk ape's body. Explosion array. However, in the next moment, the giant berserk ape's burly body rushed out of the flame. Demonic chi rolled all over its body, but it still wasn't injured at all. This was an explosion array that Lu Yi had placed with spirit stones to allow the spirit array to operate in advance, so the power it could display was at least 50% stronger than normal explosion arrays, but even so, it was still difficult to shake the protective monster chi of an overlord-grade monster beast. Kill it! The demon fox roared. The panicked cultivators woke up from their daze and attacked the giant berserk ape again. Chapter 586. Boom! Boom! Loud explosions continued to be heard, accompanied by a riot of spiritual energy. Explosion arrays were activated, and the giant raging ape was blasted until it was dizzy. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the cultivators attacked again. Many weapons and spells attacked the giant ape from all directions. In the air, Lu Yi and Xie Yunhan waved the formation flags in their hands from time to activate the power of the formation. However, there was no joy on their faces. Because until now, the giant berserk ape's protective demonic chi did not show any signs of being shaken. Without breaking its protective demonic chi, it was impossible to hurt it at all. Boom! Boom! A thunderbolt struck down from the sky and hit the top of the giant berserk ape's head. It was Lu Yi activating a thunder-summoning formation that he had set up earlier. The thunder snake swam around the surface of the giant ape's body and was annihilated. It had no effect on it at all. The cultivator's attacks and the explosion of the formation had undoubtedly infuriated the giant berserk ape. It roared and rampaged across a large area. Everywhere it went, it set off a bloody storm. Screams could be heard from time to time. In just the time it took to brew a cup of tea, more than 10 people had been killed. None of the cultivators targeted by the giant berserk ape were spared. The smell of blood filled the air, and the ground was covered with traces of blood and flesh. Under normal circumstances, the cultivator's most correct response in the face of such a situation would undoubtedly be to scatter and run as far as they could. However, the cultivators of Fox Immortal Valley were all planted with the sole secret technique by the fox demon. Therefore, even if the losses were huge, no one ran away under the fox demon's orders. Everyone was desperately urging their spiritual chi to attack the giant berserk ape. This was a battle that did not allow for the slightest retreat. It was also a battle where one had to fight to survive. The giant berserk ape's figure constantly rose and fell on the battlefield. Its attack method was simple and crude to the extreme. It was nothing more than a grab, a slap, and a pinch. However, it was such a simple and crude attack that made it difficult for the cultivators of Fox Immortal Valley to deal with. The trapping formation and hallucinatory formation that Lu Yi had set up before played a big role. Some of the cultivators who were targeted by the trapping formation and hallucinatory formation remembered his instructions and hurriedly rushed towards the trapping formation and hallucinatory formation. As the formation operated, the giant berserk apes were trapped in it, allowing the cultivators to barely escape. But even with Lu Yi and Xie Yunhan presiding over the battle formation, they could only trap the giant berserk ape for 2 or 3 breaths of time at most. This overlord-class demonic beast really let Lu Yi experience what it meant to defeat 10 with one's strength. Regardless of whether it was a trapping formation or an illusory formation, it could easily break through them. As time passed, the number of casualties continued to increase. Standing at the edge of the battlefield and watching the situation, the fox demon's expression was as cold as ice. She didn't care about the deaths of the cultivators. Her pair of beautiful, abyss-like eyes reflected the burly figure of the giant berserk ape. Deep within her beautiful eyes, there was an unforgettable resentment and hatred. Back then, she was just an ordinary fox demon who followed her master into the Taimong Mountains to train and cultivate. However, she accidentally entered the territory of the berserk giant ape. She could only watch as her master was slapped into meat paste by that tall figure. From that day onwards, there was only hatred left in her heart. As if blessed by the heavens, and also as if the seed of hatred had sprouted in her heart, her bloodline suddenly began to awaken, and she possessed abilities that shouldn't be possessed at the level of Cloud River tier, allowing her plan of revenge to have a trace of success. These years, relying on her own unique abilities, she continuously recruited cultivators who entered the depths of the Taimong Mountains, increasing the strength of her subordinate. Time after time, she came to find the giant berserk ape for revenge, but returned in disappointment every time. This time, the strength of her subordinates was the strongest, and there was an additional formation cultivator who had extremely high attainments in the Tao of formations, so it was also the time with the greatest hope. If she missed this opportunity, she was afraid that there wouldn't be a next time. Xie Yunhan told Lu Yi that the fox demon also wanted to accumulate enough strength to find the giant berserk ape for revenge, but because it wasn't easy to recruit new people, the strength of the Fox Immortal Valley was ultimately unable to increase. But in fact, that wasn't the case. The fox demon did indeed have the ability to control people's minds, but this ability also had a limit. Over 80 cultivators in the Fox Immortal Valley was practically her limit, and she already had no way of enslaving more cultivators. So it wasn't that she didn't want to accumulate enough strength, but that there was no other way. Moreover, every time she enslaved an additional cultivator, the invisible sense of danger in her heart would increase a little. After so many years, that sense of danger had almost condensed into a solid form. She was clear in her heart that this was the attention of Tianji, because she possessed power that shouldn't belong to the level of Cloud River tier, and was even using it to enslave human cultivators. To Tianji, who had always been fair and just, this was intolerable. Once that sense of danger accumulated to a certain extent, she would definitely receive punishment from Tianji. And this was her last chance, and if she still couldn't succeed this time, she wouldn't have another chance. So no matter what, she couldn't fail. What made her feel at ease was that the newly arrived formation cultivator's attainments in the Tao of formations were indeed impressive. One formation after another exploded, continuously weakening the power of the giant berserk ape, and a great many cultivators in the valley escaped with the help of the formations that he had set up. It could be said that if it weren't for the formations that Lu Yi had set up, the side of the Fox Immortal Valley would have long been defeated. Hong, 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 loud sounds rang out one after another, and Lu Ye's expression was grave. He and Xie Yunhan had spent 3 days, and set up over 100 formations in this area, but this battle had only started for a stick of incense, and half of all the formations had already been used up. Looking at the giant berserk ape, it was still completely unharmed, and its protective demonic essence was solid. On the other hand, the side of the Fox Immortal Valley had lost more than 20 people, and although the remaining people didn't retreat, and were still attacking with all their might, the results were minimal. This battle, could they really win? A trace of doubt involuntarily appeared in Lu Ye's heart. At least until now, he hadn't seen the slightest hope of victory. Taking a break from the busy battle, he glanced at the fox demon. There was only one person by the fox demon's side, and that was Li Baxian. Lu Yi didn't know why the fox demon had brought Li Baxian with her. Presumably, when Zhou Yuntian had introduced Li Baxian, he had been extremely respectful, causing the fox demon to value Li Baxian even more. If this operation failed, Li Baxian would undoubtedly become the fox demon's most anticipated chess piece. It was probably because of this reason that the fox demon had allowed Li Baxian to stay by her side, and not participate in the battle. However, this was something Lu Yi was happy to see. His fourth senior brother was only a fifth-order cultivator. Although his foundation was strong and his strength wasn't inferior to an average seventh-order cultivator, in such a battlefield, not to mention a seventh-order, even an eighth-order or ninth-order cultivator could die at any time. Of the 15 ninth-order cultivators in the valley, 3 had already died, and one of them was a body cultivator known for his powerful physique. Lu Yi saw with his own eyes that the body cultivator burst like a bubble in front of the giant berserk ape's palm. In the face of absolute strength, whether it was a body cultivator or an artifact cultivator, there was no difference. The number of spirit arrays continued to decrease, and the casualties of the cultivators in the valley continued to increase, but under the fox demon's orders, none of the cultivators slowed down their attacks on the giant berserk ape. The continuous attacks had not stopped since the beginning of the battle, bombarding the giant berserk ape's body. Another cultivator screamed as his body was crushed by the giant berserk ape. The remaining cultivators who were still alive were all covered in dust. The battle had only been going on for half an hour, but only 50 of the 80 cultivators had survived. Only 10 spirit arrays that Lu Yi had arranged remained. Just as Lu Ye's heart was heavy, the giant berserk ape suddenly roared and jumped high into the air, heading straight for the edge of the battlefield. This scene made Lu Ye's eyes light up. In previous battles, the giant berserk ape would also jump around, but it would always jump into the densest areas of the crowd. But this time, it was different. Looking at the giant berserk ape's posture, it seemed that it wanted to leave the battlefield. It was in the middle of showing off its might, yet it was making such a strange move. Lu Yi couldn't help but think, this guy is about to reach its limit. Among the nearly 100 spirit arrays, 80% were killing arrays. 1 or 2 spirit arrays wouldn't pose much of a threat to it, but after a long time, even if it wasn't injured, it would consume a lot of energy. Not to mention, the cultivators in the valley had been constantly besieging it since the beginning. Therefore, even if this overlord-level spirit beast still looked majestic, it was probably an arrow at the end of its flight. If Lu Yi could think of this, how could the fox demon, who had been paying attention to the giant berserk ape, not have? Seeing that the giant berserk ape was about to leave the battlefield, she immediately shouted, "Stop it! Don't let it get away!" Over the years, they had besieged the giant berserk ape again and again, and each time they were defeated. There had never been a situation where the giant berserk ape took the initiative to leave the battlefield. This was the first time. It was also the closest they had ever been to success. Therefore, no matter what, they couldn't let it escape. Otherwise, all their previous efforts would be for naught. Following the fox demon's order, several cultivators fearlessly flew into the air and met the giant berserk ape head-on. Each of them attacked, wanting to knock it down. However, the giant berserk ape only waved its hand, and the cultivator closest to it exploded into a cloud of blood. When the others' attacks landed on the giant berserk ape, they were like ants trying to shake a tree. The fox demon was secretly anxious. At this moment, when the giant berserk ape reached the highest point, Lu Yi suddenly waved an array flag in his hand. On the ground, a series of complex patterns lit up with dazzling light. Then, an invisible pressure fell from the sky. Several cultivators who were flying in the air to stop the giant berserk ape suddenly felt a mountain pressing down on their heads. Each of them cried out strangely and fell from the sky. The giant berserk ape was the same, and its falling speed was even faster than the cultivators. When it fell, a human-like look of confusion appeared on its face. It obviously didn't know what was going on. Forbidden Sky. Back in the spiritual land, Lu Yi activated the Forbidden Sky formation, causing Xiaoliang and the others to suffer a loss. Now that they were going to deal with an overlord-level spirit beast, they naturally wouldn't lack a Forbidden Sky formation. Previously, he wasn't sure if the giant berserk ape could fly or not. He had arranged this formation just in case, but he didn't expect it to play a miraculous role at this time. Chapter 587. Boom! The giant ape landed awkwardly, and its huge body smashed into the dust. A scene that surprised everyone appeared. As it landed, the solid body protecting demonic essence on the surface of its body showed a trace of violent vibration. It had to be known that before, whether it was the power of the formation or the attacks of the cultivators, they were unable to shake its protective demonic essence in the slightest. At this moment it was simply falling from midair, but there was actually such a violent vibration. It was obviously not normal. It was about to reach its limit. All the cultivators who saw this scene had this thought in their hearts. Kill! When a roar came out, more violent and intensive attacks than before covered the place where the giant ape landed. The already turbulent body protecting demonic essence shook even more violently. The giant ape climbed up awkwardly and roared violently. The sound waves swept out, and several cultivators nearby immediately felt a stinging pain in their eardrums. Blood flowed out of their ears, but they did not retreat a step. Instead, they madly urged their spiritual power to attack the giant ape. The giant ape once again leapt into the air. However, under the cover of the forbidden flight array, the higher it was from the ground, the greater the pressure it had to endure. For an overlord-level demonic beast like it, jumping hundreds of meters normally wasn't a problem at all. However, this time, it was only able to jump less than 10 meters before it was powerless to continue. Moreover, under the pressure of the forbidden flight array, it quickly fell back to the ground. It obviously noticed that something was wrong and no longer made useless efforts. Instead, it rushed in a direction. It was obvious that it wanted to break through by force. Don't let it escape. The fox demon shouted angrily. Immediately, more than a dozen cultivators rushed out in a flash, blocking the direction of the giant ape's escape. At the front were a few burly physique cultivators with large shields in their hands. Spells and weapons bombarded wildly, but they still could not stop the giant ape from breaking through. When it came close, the cultivators roared and put up the large shields in front of them. Their blood and chi surged as they forcibly blocked it. The giant ape swept its hand, and the cultivator at the forefront was directly swept away with a muffled groan. He vomited blood in midair and fell unconscious when he landed. Followed by the second cultivator, the third wherever the giant ape passed, it was like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. No cultivator could face it head-on. Just as the giant ape was about to break out of the encirclement, a fierce flame suddenly erupted, and a deafening explosion sounded. The flame rolled over and over, enveloping the giant ape. The few remaining explosion arrays exploded with their final brilliance. In the next moment, the great ape's burly figure tore through the flames and charged out. However, before it could even take a few steps, another large array formation was activated. A transparent, bowl-like curtain of light instantly enveloped the great ape. The great ape crashed into the curtain of light. The curtain of light rippled, but it didn't break. Instead, the great ape was knocked back several steps. Trapping array. It was originally meant to be used by the cultivators of Immortal Fox Valley to protect their lives. Unexpectedly, it had played an unexpected role at this moment. The giant ape roared angrily, and its huge palm turned into a fist, bombarding the barrier of the trapping array. With just 2 or 3 simple punches, the light barrier shattered. However, this delay of a few breaths allowed the surviving cultivators of Fox Immortal Valley to complete the encirclement. At the same time that the light screen shattered, attacks from all directions arrived as scheduled. Colorful lights drowned the giant ape. A painful roar came from the center of the spiritual energy riot, accompanied by the faint sound of something shattering. After a full 5 breaths, the giant ape finally charged out of the concentrated attack. However, its current appearance shook the spirits of all the cultivators of Fox Immortal Valley. The demonic chi protection that originally enveloped its body had disappeared without a trace. Its red fur was damaged. Not only that, there were many wounds on its body that were dripping with blood. Good! The fox demon who had been paying attention to this scene revealed a look of joy. Master, did you see that? After so many years of perseverance and waiting, there's finally a result. Today, Sien can avenge you. After breaking the great ape's demonic chi protection, the originally insufferably arrogant Lord-level demonic beast was now in a sorry state. Seeing that victory was in sight, the cultivators of Fox Immortal Valley attacked even more fiercely. The great ape roared angrily and raised its arms to block in front of its body. However, it was still unable to block the attacks of the spells and Imperial equipment. The injuries on its body increased. If it was an ordinary demonic beast, without the demonic chi protection, it would have already died under such a concentrated attack. However, Unlord-level demonic beast was still Unlord-level demonic beast. Its physical body was unbelievably strong. Although there were many injuries on its body, they were only superficial. It no longer had the awe-inspiring aura it had when it first arrived. It also sensed that its situation was not good. It should have been invincible in the Cloud River battlefield, but it suddenly smelled the scent of death. This caused its mind to be somewhat flustered. It instinctively charged towards a direction to break out of the encirclement. However, it had only taken a few steps before it was beaten back by the violent attacks of the cultivators there. It changed directions, but it was still the same. Although many cultivators of Fox Immortal Valley had died, there were still about 50 people left. Facing an Lord-level demonic beast that had exhausted its demonic chi, they naturally had the upper hand. If there were no accidents, it would not be long before the giant berserk ape was killed by the cultivators. Killing an Lord-level demonic beast was something that no one dared to think about before. However, at this moment, such a victory was easily obtainable. In such a situation, even without the orders of the Fox Immortal Valley, the cultivators of the valley did not hold back. However, at this moment, the giant berserk ape suddenly roared. When it opened its mouth, a resplendent earthen yellow light burst forth from its mouth. That halo turned into a straight line and charged forward. Wherever it passed, all the techniques and Imperial equipment lost their luster. It destroyed everything in its path. A body cultivator who bore the brunt of the attack was stunned on the spot. Only when the earthen yellow light disappeared from his eyes did he lower his head to look at his chest in a daze. What he saw caused his pupils to shrink. He did not know when, but a bowl-sized hole had appeared in his chest, piercing through his entire body. He only felt his vision turn black as he fell to the ground. As if there was some kind of chain reaction, when the first body cultivator fell, 7 or 8 cultivators behind him all fell to the ground. Each of them had a bowl-sized hole in their bodies, and their lives were slim. Most people did not know what had happened. Lu Yi, who was standing in the air and paying attention to the situation on the battlefield, clearly saw that the earthen yellow light was the color of the demonic core. Just now, the giant berserk ape had directly used its own demonic core. He had heard that demonic beasts could use their demonic cores to attack when in a desperate situation. However, not every demonic beast had such an ability. After all, the demonic core was the crystallization of a demonic beast's strength. Once it left its body, its vitality would be greatly damaged, and if it was serious, it would immediately lose its life. Therefore, even if some demonic beasts had such an ability, they would not dare to use it unless they had no other choice. The giant berserk ape had used its demonic core at this time. It was clearly forced into a desperate situation and was going all out. The result was the death of 7 or 8 cultivators in the direction of the demonic core's attack. This scene caused him to feel a chill all over his body. When fighting against an overlord-level demonic beast, one really could not be careless. It was clearly an arrow at the end of its flight, but it still had such a terrifying method. He was only glad that he was a formation cultivator in Fox Immortal Valley and did not need to participate in this battle. Otherwise, it was very likely that he would be one of the dead cultivators. This was not something that could be avoided with enough caution. The cultivators who could survive were not stronger, but lucky. Originally, the encirclement was impenetrable. No matter which direction the giant berserk ape tried to break through, it would be beaten back by the cultivators. However, with the attack of the demonic core, a gap had appeared in the encirclement. Almost at the same time that the earthen yellow light was annihilated, the giant berserk ape broke out of the encirclement. Midway, it retrieved its demonic core and fled into the distance. The surviving cultivators were clearly shocked by the attack just now. They were unable to stop it for a moment. "What are you still standing there for?" the fox demon shouted. Her face, which should have been an outstanding beauty, was now distorted and sinister. Extremely vicious words came out of her mouth. "If it escapes today, all of you will die." As soon as she said that, the cultivator's expressions changed drastically. Zhou Yuntian, who was covered in blood, raised his arm and shouted, "Chase!" He immediately flew into the air and charged in the direction that the giant berserk ape had escaped. The surviving cultivators followed closely behind. The giant berserk ape had been beaten until its demonic energy was exhausted. It was forced to use its demonic core to attack. At this moment, it could be said that its vitality was greatly damaged. Therefore, even if it ran out of the range of the sky-ceiling formation, its speed was not fast. In just a moment, the cultivators caught up to the giant berserk ape. The battle began again, but this time, the cultivators completely had the upper hand. The fox demon also followed. Things like revenge naturally had to be done personally. Only then would it be more meaningful. Xie Yunhan called out to Lu Yi and flew over as well. Lu Yi was a short distance behind. While no one was paying attention to him, he raised his hand and tapped on the battlefield imprint to send out a message. By the time Lu Yi arrived at the battlefield, the situation was already very clear. Although the giant berserk ape was fighting with all its might, its demonic energy was exhausted. Using its demonic core to attack had greatly damaged its vitality. At this moment, its body was covered in wounds and its strength was not even half of its peak. Although the number of cultivators on the Fox Immortal Valley's side had been reduced by more than half, there were still nearly 40 people. Under the premise that it could not fly, how could the giant berserk ape be a match? As time passed, the giant berserk ape's momentum became weaker and weaker. The wounds on its body also increased. The blood flowing from its body dyed the ground under its feet red. until a certain moment when it could no longer hold on, its burly body fell to the ground with a loud bang. It was not dead, but it no longer had the strength to continue fighting. The surviving cultivators surrounded it. There was no cheering or excitement, only deep reverence. The losses in today's battle were too heavy. The fox demon parted the crowd and walked forward with flirtatious steps. The hatred in its eyes was so condensed that it was almost tangible. "Supreme One, be careful," Zhou Yuntian shouted in a low voice. He and a few other cultivators followed closely beside the fox demon. The fox demon flew into the air and stood a few feet above the giant berserk ape. It looked down with a cold expression, but its eyes were filled with satisfaction. "You also have a day like this." Chapter 588. The giant ape lay quietly on the ground, gasping for air with its mouth wide open. The light in its eyes was dim. "Seal its limbs." The fox demon clenched her teeth and ordered. Immediately, many cultivators rushed out with spirit weapons in their hand. They fiercely stabbed the giant ape's limbs, firmly nailing it to the ground. Blood splattered. The giant ape showed a painful expression. It instinctively struggled, but to no avail. It had completely exhausted its strength. The fox demon reached out and grabbed a sword from a cultivator's hand. She floated down and stepped on the giant ape's chest. Her body was half tilted, and her chest was exposed. But at this moment, no cultivator had the courage to admire this rare beauty. "Do you still recognize me?" The fox demon's eyes were filled with pleasure. The words that came out of her mouth were bone-chilling. "I said, one day you will die by my hands. I have waited for this day for 18 years. 18 years. Her face showed an expression that was unsure whether to cry or laugh. 18 years of waiting, failure after failure. The hatred that filled her heart could finally be vented at this moment. She held the sword hilt with both hands and aimed it at the giant ape's chest. She raised it high and gritted her teeth. "Die!" The long sword fiercely stabbed down. A light sound was heard. Blood splattered. The long sword went straight to the hilt. After suffering such a heavy blow, a trace of clarity flashed through the huge ape's gloomy eyes. It let out a furious roar and suddenly raised one of its arms that should have been immobilized on the ground. As the group of cultivators cried out in alarm, it sent a slap towards the fox demon. The fox demon's expression changed. She didn't expect that her enemy still had the strength to fight back in such a state. She also didn't expect that it still had the ability to break free from its restraint. Her reaction was also fast. Almost at the moment the giant ape raised its hand, she floated back. But she was still affected by the giant ape's attack. Her tall and graceful body was like a falling leaf. "Supreme One!" The group of cultivators turned pale with fright. The fox demon fell to the ground in a sorry state. She spat out a mouthful of blood. Her face suddenly turned pale, and her aura was violently fluctuating. She was only slightly hit by the giant ape's attack, and she was already so heavily injured. If she didn't react fast enough, she would have died. "Kill it!" The fox demon roared with hatred. The cultivators obeyed. Many attacks fell on the giant ape, but it didn't respond. The slap that hit the fox demon was the last sound of its life. Zhou Yuntian, who was covered in injuries, rushed to the fox demon and asked with concern, "Supreme One, how are your injuries?" The fox demon slowly shook its head. Zhou Yuntian hurriedly took out a healing pill from his storage bag and offered it to the fox demon. The fox demon did not stand on ceremony and swallowed it. A moment later, a pale-faced Udaiwei came forward with an earthy yellow monster core in her hands and reported, "Your Honor, the giant ape is dead." The fox demon opened her eyes and looked at the demon pill in front of her. She nodded slightly, her expression calm with a hint of confusion. 18 years. She had spent every single day of these 18 years in hatred. Now that she had gotten her revenge, she was elated, but at the same time, she felt a sense of emptiness. It was as if she had lost her goal in life. He raised his head and looked at the many cultivators under his command. Almost all of them were injured and covered in dirt. She. Lu Yi and Xie Yunhan bowed and thanked her. Rest here. We'll return to the valley in 6 hours. Yes, the cultivators answered. After the battle, everyone relaxed. They looked for a place to rest. There was no need to be vigilant. This was the territory of the overlord-level demonic beasts. No demonic beasts dared to come here. However, less than half of them were still alive. Even with this half, many of them were heavily injured. It had to be said, that was with the assistance of the hundreds of magic arrays that Lu Yi and Xie Yunhan had set up in advance. Additionally, the cultivators were under the control of the Fox Yaos and were fighting to the death. Not a single one of them managed to escape. Additionally, the cultivation bases of the cultivators from Immortal Fox Valley were generally higher. If the cultivators were to form a group to kill the giant berserk ape, they would need at least 200 to 300 people. The terror of overlord-level demonic beasts was evident. Among the cultivators, only 3 were uninjured. Li Baxian, Lu Yi and Xie Yunhan were in charge of the formations. The cultivators were meditating. The fox demon was also healing. Lu Yi said, "Fellow Taoist Xie, you should go and rest. I'll set up some vigilance formations." Xie Yunhan nodded. "Then I'll have to trouble you." Lu Yi walked to a place not far away. As he set up the formations, he raised his hand and tapped on the battlefield imprint. He sent a message. Soon there was a reply. Lu Yi checked and his eyes flashed. A moment later, he quietly returned and sat down cross-legged not far from the fox demon. He stuffed a few spirit pills into his mouth and silently refined them. Time passed. At a certain moment, some rustling sounds came from the quiet forest. The cultivators had excellent hearing. Hearing these sounds, the cultivators who were meditating opened their eyes. However, before they could figure out what was going on, huge wolves with silver fur suddenly appeared in front of them. These giant wolves swarmed out from all directions, surrounding everyone in an airtight encirclement. In the next moment, these demonic wolves seemed to have discussed it. On average, 6 to 7 wolves targeted a cultivator and directly attacked. Enemy attack! A furious roar broke the silence. Many cultivators stood up and immediately fought against the attacking demonic wolves. Zhou Yuntian shouted, "Protect the Venerable One." While shouting, he ran towards the fox demon. However, he had only taken a few steps before he was entangled by several demonic wolves. Somewhere in the crowd, Li Baxian gazed at this scene with astonishment. As he watched those familiar wolves dashing about on the battlefield, an uneasy feeling suddenly arose in his heart. However, before he could figure it out, a figure descended from the sky and landed before him. Li Baxian's expression changed. Yuechan? He never thought that Feng Yuechan would appear in front of him like this. Senior brother. Feng Yuechan stared at Li Baxian's eyes. She couldn't see anything special from his expression. However, with Lu Ye's previous messages, how could she not know that her senior brother's mind had been enslaved by the fox demon? She couldn't see anything unusual from his appearance. "Why are you?" Before Li Baxian could finish his words, he suddenly reacted and turned to look at the fox demon. The scene that entered his eyes made his soul fly out of his body. At some point, Lu Yi had arrived at the fox demon's side, looking like a loyal protector. However, just as everyone's attention was attracted by the sudden appearance of the wolf pack, the long saber in his hand suddenly ignited with flames. He aimed at the fox demon's back, and with lightning speed, he thrust the saber forward. With a soft sound, the mountain coiling saber pierced through the fox demon's back and came out through her chest. The fox demon's eyes instantly widened. The other cultivators around her also felt a chill run down their spines. No one would have thought that Lu Yi would suddenly kill the fox demon. A faint light flashed on the mountain coiling saber as the grand thrust spirit inscriptions strengthened it. It was undeniable that the fox demon was very strong. Judging from the sword strike she had used to kill the great ape, Her strength was comparable to a ninth-order Cloud River Realm cultivator. Lu Yi was no match for her in a head-on confrontation. However, she had been injured by the giant ape and was distracted by the sudden appearance of the wolf pack. In addition, she didn't think that the cultivators under her command would actually try to kill her, so she was completely unprepared for it. The fox demon's body was pierced through by the saber. Her expression was already twisted in pain, and the sudden eruption of the grand thrust spirit inscriptions caused her to cry out in pain. Blood sprayed from her mouth, and fragments of her internal organs could be vaguely seen. Lu Yi! Angry roars rang out. The cultivators standing beside the fox demon finally reacted and attacked Lu Yi. However, Lu Yi had expected this situation when he attacked. When he succeeded, he drew his saber and repelled the fox demon, bringing out a burst of hot blood from the fox demon's body. Layers of defensive spirit tattoos appeared in front of him. Hong hong hong. The huge impact sent Lu Yi flying. When he landed on the ground, he saw the cultivators rushing towards him with boundless killing intent. Just a moment ago, he was a great hero praised by the fox demon, making all the cultivators in Fox Immortal Valley envious. Now, he was an enemy they had to kill. For these cultivators in the valley, the fox demon was their sky. Lu Ye's sudden betrayal was undoubtedly intolerable. Standing in place, Lu Yi did not move at all. Just as the cultivators were about to reach him, wolf howls came from behind him. Demon wolves the size of calves rushed out to meet the cultivators, and a battle immediately broke out. Separated by several dozen feet, the fox demon's gaze met with Lu Ye's. Her beautiful eyes trembled and were filled with disbelief. How? Even now, she was still unable to accept the fact that one of her subordinates had suddenly stabbed her. On the other side, seeing the fox demon injured, Li Baxian wanted to come and protect her. However, Feng Yuechan activated her spirit chi and a huge cloud giant several dozen feet tall appeared in front of Li Baxian and stopped him. Her heart was filled with bitterness, but she didn't try to persuade Li Baxian. She knew that if she wanted to lift the soul secret technique, she had to let Lu Yi kill the fox demon. Her only task now was to keep Li Baxian busy and not let him get close to Lu Yi. Dong dong dong. It was as if a war hammer had struck the ground, causing the ground to tremble. A tall and burly figure rapidly approached the fox demon. When he was close enough, he punched out. The sound of the punch piercing through the air showed just how terrifying its power was. Shockingly, it was the attack of the giant armor. In the fox demon's current state, if she was hit by this punch, even if her strength was comparable to a Cloud River Realm 9th Order, she would die without a doubt. As she retreated, her eyes shone with a demonic light. Giant armor's burly figure was reflected in her eyes. A strange energy fluctuated. Lu Yi, who was rushing towards the fox demon, felt this strange energy and his heart inexplicably jumped. A sense of unease grew in his heart. To be continued. Chapter 589. Looking up, he saw that giant armor was still in his punching posture with a look of intense struggle on his face. In an instant, he stood in front of the fox demon and threw a punch at Lu Yi. Lu Yi leaped away and dodged the attack. The shock in his heart could not be any greater. In just a short exchange, giant armor's mind had been enslaved by the fox demon. What kind of heaven-defying technique was this? Lu Yi did not know how the fox demon could enslave a person's mind. He only guessed that it was her innate talent. However, according to the information Lu Yi had, even if the fox demon wanted to do this, she had to have direct contact with a person. Previously, when he pretended to be unconscious and was brought back to Fox Immortal Valley, the fox demon reached out and touched his forehead, then used a secret technique. He never thought that the fox demon would be able to use this secret technique from a distance without any direct contact. Furthermore, giant armor had once followed him into the soul-cleansing pool and tempered its soul there. Although it didn't benefit as much as he did, its soul was still much tougher than cultivators of the same level. Even so, it was enslaved by her with a single glance. The power of this fox demon's innate ability was far beyond Lu Ye's imagination. Lu Ye was caught off guard by the unexpected turn of events. Her trusted helper suddenly stood on the opposite side of her. What puzzled Lu Ye even more was why the fox demon did not die after being hit by his blade. His blade was aimed at the fox demon's heart. When it pierced through the fox demon's body, it was reinforced with thorny spirit patterns. There was no reason for the fox demon to survive. However, although this fellow's aura was as weak as a candle in the wind, she did not die. After forcing Lu Ye back with a punch, Giant Armor suddenly turned around and picked up the fox demon who was vomiting blood. He leaped into the sky and fled into the depths of Great Mang Mountain. Oh no! If he let Giant Armor take the fox demon away, then all his plans today would be for naught. He had waited in Fox Immortal Valley for so long, and today's opportunity finally came. There would be no next time. Furthermore, he had already been exposed today. If he really let Giant Armor take the fox demon away, he might not be able to find them in the future. Just as Lu Ye was thinking this, a slender figure suddenly appeared in front of the Giant Armor. It was Yi, who had been hiding nearby. At this moment, Yi went straight for the Giant Armor. She raised her hands and blasted out a few spells. The Giant Armor did not dodge, and the spells collided with the sky full of sparks. It held the severely injured fox demon in one hand and formed a fist with the other. It mercilessly punched at Yi. Lu Ye's heart tightened. However, at this moment, the 9-front formation appeared in Yi's hand. It expanded in the wind and turned into a giant screen that covered the sky, covering the Giant Armor. Caught off guard, Giant Armor's fist smashed into the formation map. It was as if it had smashed into an invisible space, and its entire arm was swallowed up. The Giant Armor wanted to retreat, but Lu Ye had already charged over. He kicked the Giant Armor's back viciously. It was as if he was kicking steel, and a dull thud was heard. He kicked the Giant Armor right into the 9-front formation. On the map, 2 figures immediately appeared in the middle of a stone forest. Well done, Lu Ye praised. He followed closely behind the Giant Armor and plunged into the 9-front formation. Inside the 9-front formation, the gloomy sky was like thick cotton wool, pressing down on one's heart to the point of suffocation. Strange vortexes rotated slowly in the sky, and the entire world gave off an extremely uncomfortable feeling. This was not a real world to begin with. It was just the space inside the 9-front formation. The Giant Armor was still holding the fox demon. It stood quietly under a stone pillar, glaring fiercely at Lu Ye who had chased after it. The expression on its face was unfamiliar to Lu Ye. The fox demon was still coughing up blood, a look of panic that had never appeared on her face before. Compared to her own tragic experience, what shocked her the most was Lu Ye's sudden betrayal. She had never thought that a cultivator under her command would betray her one day, and even bring her such great pain. They were dozens of feet apart. The Giant Armor did not move, and neither did Lu Ye. Although the Giant Armor's cultivation was the same as his, no one in this world knew better than Lu Ye how strong the Giant Armor's physical body was. If it was a fight to the death, he could certainly defeat the Giant Armor, but he would not have it easy either. However, the Giant Armor's mind was now enslaved. If he did not deal with the Giant Armor, he would not be able to cause any harm to the fox demon. It was truly a headache. "Who exactly are you?" the fox demon shouted through gritted teeth. Lu Ye glanced at her indifferently. His gaze was calm, as if he was looking at a dead person. After entering the 9-front formation, the fox demon was dead for sure. Now, he needed to think about how to bypass the Giant Armor and kill the fox demon. "You were never affected by my secret technique, were you?" the fox demon asked again. At this point, she finally understood something. Today's encounter was definitely not a coincidence. Lu Ye had planned it all along. He took advantage of the fact that the Fox Immortal Valley's people were relaxed after the battle with the giant raging ape and their strength was greatly weakened. He suddenly attacked and caught her off guard. At this moment, Yi's voice suddenly entered Lu Ye's ears. "Lu Yi, do you want to send in some demon wolves to help?" "No." Lu Yi hurriedly refused. It would have been fine if he did not know that the fox demon could enslave people's minds from afar. Now that he knew, he could not allow anyone or demon beasts to enter the nine-front formation. Otherwise, not only would they be of help, but they would also make the situation worse. Even the giant armor could not block the fox demon's secret technique, let alone demon wolves. If he really sent them in, they would only become the fox demon's helpers. Therefore, he was the only one fighting in today's battle. Apart from me, he could not rely on anyone else. "I'll act according to the circumstances," Lu Yi softly muttered. His body arched slightly, and the mountain plate saber was held vertically in front of him. He stared at the giant armor and got into an attacking posture. In the next instant, dust flew under his feet. With the support of wind travel, his body pounced forward like lightning. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of the giant armor. The fiery saber slashed down viciously at the fox demon in the giant armor's arms. The giant armor raised its right arm. A mystic light bloomed on its right arm, forming a shield. The saber slashed down with a clanging sound. The force of the impact caused Lu Ye's body to lean back slightly. However, the mystic light shield on the giant armor's arm only trembled slightly. In the next instant, the mountain plate saber slashed down again, mercilessly at the fox demon. The fox demon's pupils shrank. Lu Ye's position in the Immortal Fox Valley had always been an array cultivator. The fox demon's greatest understanding of him was that he was extremely accomplished in the Tao of arrays. This time, the Immortal Fox Valley was able to smoothly kill the giant berserk ape because of the many spirit arrays arranged by Lu Yi. However, the fox demon had never expected that the array cultivator she relied heavily on would be able to display such strength. Lu Yi was only a fourth-order cultivator, but his strength was not inferior to the 6th or 7th-order cultivators in the valley. What surprised her even more was the giant armor's performance. Enslaving the giant armor was something she did out of helplessness. She never expected that this burly man, who had the same cultivation as Lu Yi and whom she had only met for the first time, would have such an eye-catching performance. These two. Where did these monsters come from? I seem to have enslaved an incredible guy. Just as the fox demon's mind was wavering, Lu Yi and the giant armor had already clashed more than 10 times. Every time Lu Yi slashed down, he used his full strength without holding back. Every strike he slashed down was completely blocked by the giant armor. Although the fox demon knew that the giant armor's physique was strong and his defense was impressive, it was only after fighting him that she truly realized how terrifying his defense was. Although the giant armor was not injured, he was still in a difficult position under Lu Ye's continuous attacks. First, he was the passive party, and second, he had to spare some energy to protect the fox demon in his arms. Even if he didn't have any worries, he might not be Lu Ye's match if he were to fight him to the death, let alone now. Under the heavy blows of the saber, the giant armor's figure was constantly pushed back. On the other hand, Lu Ye's figure was getting closer and closer as the pressure on his body grew stronger and stronger. The fox demon sensed that something was wrong and suddenly raised her eyes to look at Lu Yi. Her beautiful eyes immediately turned into an abyss as the strange energy fluctuations fluctuated again. Even if she guessed that Lu Yi was unlikely to be affected by her secret technique, the fox demon still couldn't help but want to try. The strange energy invaded Lu Ye's mind, and his innate talent immediately ignited with a faint gray mist. The fox demon's eyes dimmed slightly. Sure enough, this guy has absolute resistance to my secret technique. But she really couldn't understand how a 4th-order Cloud River Realm cultivator could resist it. No matter how strong his mind is, It doesn't make sense that he wouldn't be affected by my secret technique. Another saber slashed down. As the saber fell, the mountain saber flashed with a brilliant light. The heavy pressure spirit rune was added to it. Giant Armor, who had raised his arm to block this attack, instantly lowered his body. He felt a tremendous force pressing down on him. He roared furiously, and a vast and violent power gushed out from his body, wanting to resist the suppression of this power. But in the next moment, the heavy pressure suddenly disappeared. The sudden change overwhelmed Giant Armor. His impregnable defense finally revealed a flaw, and even his figure staggered. Lu Yi pulled out his saber and stabbed it straight at the fox demon's face. A look of horror appeared on the fox demon's pale face. The fiery red saber light reflected in her beautiful eyes rapidly magnified in her vision. But in the end, the saber didn't take her life. At the critical moment, Giant Armor grabbed the mountain saber and gritted his teeth, refusing to let go even though the sharp edge of the saber cut his big hand and made it bleed. The corner of Lu Ye's eyes twitched. He leaped up and kicked out, using the rebound force to distance himself from Giant Armor. Pooh. The fox demon coughed up blood. Her face was pale without a trace of blood. Although she had been protected by the Giant Armor all this time and hadn't been injured by Lu Yi, the battle between Lu Yi and the Giant Armor had been so violent that no matter how well the Giant Armor had protected her, she had still been injured quite a bit. Normally, this kind of shockwave wouldn't have affected her much, but she had been injured by the giant berserk ape and then Lu Ye's sneak attack. Now that she was seriously injured, the shock waves from the repeated clashes were extremely uncomfortable. Giant Armor obviously noticed this. He lowered his head and looked at the fox demon in his arms, his eyes full of worry. Chapter 590. Before Lu Yi deployed and carried out his plan, he would never have thought that Giant Armor would be the one to obstruct his plan. This was truly the biggest joke in the world. At this point, if he wanted to kill the fox demon under Giant Armor's protection, he would have to kill Giant Armor first. This was an outcome that Lu Yi absolutely could not accept. Although his attack just now was ruthless and extremely violent, that was because he knew that Giant Armor could withstand it, so he did not hold back at all. At that moment, Lu Ye's eyes involuntarily lit up when he saw the fox demoness vomit blood. He suddenly discovered that he did not have to kill the Giant Armor to kill the fox demoness. He only needed to maintain his previous attack. The Giant Armor could withstand it, but the heavily injured fox demoness definitely would not be able to withstand the shockwaves from their clash, no matter how well the Giant Armor protected her. With that thought, Lu Yi pounced on Giant Armor again. His blood, chi, and spiritual power surged as he brazenly attacked. His ferocious slashes were blocked time and time again. Every collision caused Giant Armor's body to tremble, and even the fox demon in his arms was affected. As time passed, Giant Armor's spiritual power protection was constantly shattered and reformed. Lu Yi was also panting. With his current strength, he could basically finish off a cultivator of the same level with a single slash. However, Lu Yi felt deeply powerless against Giant Armor. This fellow's defense was simply too strong. However, the effect was very obvious. Although Giant Armor was not injured, the fox demon in his arms was constantly bleeding, and her aura was getting weaker. Until a certain moment, when Lu Ye's slash landed, Giant Armor's fist blasted out, hitting the mountain slash squarely. The spiritual power on the fist shattered, and a trace of a dent appeared on Giant Armor's fist. Lu Yi was also sent flying by the impact of this punch. At this moment, the fox demon, who had been protected in Giant Armor's arms and was as fragile as a candle in the wind, suddenly leaped up and pounced straight at Lu Yi. Lu Yi was horrified. Ever since she was sucked into the nine-front formation, the fox demon was so weak that she could die at any moment. As Lu Yi and Giant Armor fought, her condition became worse and worse, causing Lu Yi to think that she was about to die. But now, looking at her posture, everything just now was just a disguise. all for this momentary counterattack. This caught Lu Yi off guard. As her figure flew through the air, the fox demon's pale face was filled with ruthlessness and determination. 5 sharp nails suddenly pierced out of her jade hand and clawed at Lu Yi's head. Lu Yi hurriedly steadied himself and slashed out with his saber, directly splitting the fox demon's figure into 2. There were no screams, no blood, and there wasn't even the slightest sensation of cutting anything. A great danger came from behind, accompanied by Yi's cry of alarm. The fox demon's figure in front of him collapsed. It was only an afterimage. At the same time, Lu Yi clearly sensed a fatal aura approaching a foot behind him. During this period of time, under Xiao Yang's guidance, he had cultivated the Heart's Eye secret technique. Every day, he would train himself in the Mirage realm. His Heart's Eye secret technique had reached the small completion, and he could clearly sense any attack that came within 1 foot of him. His body reacted before his mind. A defensive spirit rune suddenly appeared behind his head, and at the same time, Lu Yi stabbed out with his saber. With a cracking sound, the defense that had just taken shape shattered. Lu Yi felt a cold, stinging sensation from the top of his head as a sharp aura pierced through his skin and pressed against his skull. An unprecedented sense of danger enveloped his body and mind. Lu Yi knew that if the other party didn't stop, he would definitely die in the next moment. Fortunately, he stabbed his saber behind him while activating the defensive spirit rune. It was this move that saved him from the fate of being killed. The fox demon decisively stopped and flew out. If she didn't stop, she would definitely end up in a situation where she perished together with Lu Yi. This was something she absolutely couldn't accept. In front, Giant Armor, who had been blasted back, stabilized himself and was about to pounce on Lu Yi. Lu Yi growled, "E." As soon as he said that, an invisible force appeared out of thin air. The space around Giant Armor distorted, and then Giant Armor disappeared. He had been forcefully sent out of the 9-spirit array by Yi. The 9-spirit array was a spirit artifact-grade treasure. As Yi's cultivation increased, the power she could unleash increased. Yi's current strength was comparable to a 3rd-order Cloud River Realm cultivator. She could control the 9-spirit array, and not only could she draw enemies into the array, she could also interfere with them to a certain extent. Giant Armor had been guarding the fox demon in his arms. Lu Yi was originally thinking about how to separate them. As long as he separated them, Yi could use the power of the 9-spirit array to send Giant Armor away. Then, he would be able to attack the fox demon without restraint. However, Giant Armor never gave him this opportunity. He didn't expect that the fox demon would create such a good opportunity to kill him. How could Yi miss such an opportunity? Even without Lu Ye's order, she would have sent Giant Armor away immediately. When Giant Armor suddenly disappeared, a look of panic flashed across the fox demon's pale face. She knew that she had made an extremely stupid decision. She was so regretful that her intestines turned green. Her original intention was to kill Lu Yi. In fact, if she hadn't flinched at that moment, Lu Yi would have died without a doubt. However, how could she be willing to die together with Lu Yi? Now that Giant Armor had been sent out of the 9-spirit array, she was left to face Lu Yi alone. Everything pointed to disaster. A bitter smile appeared on the fox demon's face. She had finally gotten her revenge, but she didn't expect to fall into such a dangerous situation in the blink of an eye. Was it retribution for all the bad things she had done over the years? Lu Yi turned around. There was a 5-fingered mark on his head. Blood flowed out and slid down his cheeks, adding a hint of ferocity to his calm expression. "It's just you and me," he said calmly. The flames on the mountain coiling saber ignited again. A look of determination appeared on the fox demon's tired and weak face. Even though she knew that she was doomed this time, she wouldn't just sit and wait for death. She hadn't gone back to comfort her master and tell him that she had gotten her revenge, so she couldn't die no matter what. She didn't know where her strength came from, but the fox demon, who was supposed to be at the end of her rope, suddenly revealed her true form with a muffled sound. She was a heavenly fox that was more than 10 feet tall. She had snow-white fur all over her body, a pointy mouth and green eyes. Behind her, 6 furry tails swayed wantonly. Although she was in her true form, the fox demon still gave off an extremely seductive feeling. Anyone who saw her would probably fall for her. Even Lu Yi, who was determined to kill, was slightly shaken when he saw the fox demon's true form. However, his eyes quickly regained their clarity. The fox demon let out a low growl. Lu Ye's figure was reflected in her green eyes. Her eyes were filled with unwillingness and anger. Without waiting for Lu Yi to attack, she suddenly swung her furry tails. Several balls of pink fox fire suddenly shot towards Lu Yi at an incredible speed. At the same time, she dashed towards Lu Yi. The long saber in Lu Ye's hand slashed down, shattering several balls of fox fire. However, the shattered fox fire didn't disappear. Instead, it turned into even smaller flames. Lu Yi didn't pay attention and the few balls of fox fire touched his body. In an instant, several holes appeared on his clothes. A slight tingling sensation came from his skin, but Lu Ye's mind began to shake violently. It felt like an invisible impact had fiercely shaken his mind, causing him to see stars and illusions. For a moment, green, purple, white, and gold lights filled his vision. He couldn't see anything else. This fox fire didn't have much killing power, but it had the ability to shake one's mind. Lu Yi immediately reacted, but it was already too late. The fox demon had already arrived in front of him. Her sharp claws viciously slashed down. With a ripping sound, the clothes on Lu Ye's chest were torn apart. Several bone-deep wounds appeared on his chest, and his flesh was badly mutilated. In the battle with the giant berserk ape, the fox demon hadn't made a move from beginning to end. She only stabbed the giant berserk ape once when it was about to die, so Lu Ye's understanding of her was only that she was a monster beast comparable to a Cloud River 9th Order cultivator. He didn't expect that the fox fire used by the fox demon would have such a strange ability. However, the fox demon had the innate ability to control one's mind. The fox fire itself didn't have much killing power, but it could shake one's mind. This was understandable. However, this strange ability couldn't be countered by a Cloud River Realm cultivator. In a single exchange, Lu Yi was injured. Borrowing the force of his opponent's attack, he floated backwards and slashed out with his saber. However, the fox demon's movements were extremely fast. Just as he stabilized his body and calmed his shaking mind, the fox demon swung her furry tail and sent several balls of fox fire towards him. After suffering once, Lu Yi wouldn't suffer a second time. He immediately dodged, but the fox fire was like a maggot in his bones. When it got close, it exploded, filling the sky with sparks. Even though Lu Yi activated his defensive spirit rune in time, he couldn't completely avoid it. A few more sparks landed on his body. Lu Ye's vision was once again filled with illusions, and he couldn't see clearly. At this moment, the Heart's Eye secret technique played a miraculous role. Just now, he was caught off guard and his mind was shaken, so he couldn't defend against the fox demon's attack. However, this time, he was prepared and immediately sensed that there was an attack coming from his left. The mountain coiling saber slashed out, and the flesh on his right arm bulged slightly. A faint cry like a baby's cry rang out. By the time Lu Yi came back to his senses, the fox demon had stopped 10 feet away from him. Her snow-white fur was stained with dark red blood. She was already injured. Her green eyes were filled with shock. She obviously didn't expect Lu Yi to be able to counterattack so accurately in such a situation. Ee! Lu Yi called out softly, wanting her to provide some help. I can't, Lu Yi. Giant armor is chasing me. Yi's voice traveled into his ears. If no one disturbed her, Yi could still activate the power of the 9-front formation to help. However, after she forcefully sent giant armor out, it kept chasing after her. Yi was also very helpless. Now, she could only maintain the operation of the 9-front formation and provide a place for Lu Yi to kill the fox demon. Fortunately, although Giant Armor's physique was strong, its greatest weakness was that it wasn't fast enough. Thus, Yi didn't have to worry about it for the time being. Chapter 591. Lu Yi took a light breath and looked at the fox demon. He couldn't count on Yi, so he could only rely on himself. He secretly rejoiced that he had learned the mind's eye secret technique from Xiaoliang and had a perfect training ground like the Mirage Realm, allowing him to achieve some minor success in the mind's eye secret technique in an extremely short period of time. Otherwise, this battle would really be difficult. However, the threat of the fox fire still couldn't be underestimated. His spirit was powerful, so the power of his mind was also extremely tough. Even so, his mind was still in turmoil when he was attacked by the fox fire. If it were an ordinary Cloud River tier cultivator who was hit by the fox fire, they would probably be stabbed in the neck. This fox demon could be domineering in the Fox Immortal Valley for close to 20 years. Sure enough, she didn't just rely on that strange spirit secret technique. This fox fire was probably a power she had never revealed in front of others. Looking at the vigilant fox demon in front of him, Lu Yi slowly closed his eyes. Exclamation point. The fox demon's green eyes narrowed slightly. Cloud River tier cultivators more or less had their own perception, but because it didn't involve the cultivation of the spirit, this kind of perception was extremely weak. Usually, it could be used to perceive some things, but in a real life and death battle, the perception of a Cloud River tier cultivator couldn't be relied on at all. However, the enemy in front of her actually closed his eyes. This made the fox demon momentarily unsure of what Lu Yi wanted to do. However, she didn't have time to think too much. Only she knew how serious her injuries were, and the strength she could use now was limited. She had to kill this traitor in front of her in the shortest time possible to have any hope of survival. Thus, with only a moment of hesitation, a few more balls of fox fire flew toward Lu Yi, followed closely by the fox demon's fierce, killing intent. The fox fire floated within a foot of Lu Yi and suddenly exploded, turning into little sparks that fell on his body. At this moment, Lu Yi frowned slightly. Obviously, he had been hit by a strange force again, and his mind was shaken and uneasy. It was also at this moment that the fox demon that pounced over stretched out her sharp claws. She raised her long saber and stabbed it at an incredible angle. The fox demon's eyes couldn't help but narrow, and she hurriedly dodged. She looked at Lu Yi, whose eyes were still closed, in shock and uncertainty. She quickly launched another attack, still using fox fire to open the way, and her true body followed closely behind. However, the exact same thing happened again. The fox demon retreated, feeling extremely shocked. If the first time was a coincidence, then the second time definitely wasn't. This guy could actually block my attack with his eyes closed? On what basis? It had not been easy for her to get her revenge. Now, she only had one wish, and that was to return to Fox Immortal Valley and comfort her master's spirit in front of his grave. However, her final wish was getting further and further away from her. On what basis? The heavens were so unfair. The mournful howl of a fox rang out, and when it reached Lu Ye's ears, it shook his mind, causing him to frown. Along with the howl, the fox fire that blotted out the sky and covered the earth fell in an endless stream. The fox demon's true body was hidden in the fox fire, and it launched a crazy attack on Lu Yi. Lu Yi stood in place and defended himself. The damage caused by the fox fire was negligible. The fox fire itself didn't have much lethality, but the impact of the fox fire on his mind was unavoidable. Moreover, the fox demon's angry attacks couldn't be underestimated. Even if she was seriously injured and couldn't display her full strength, she was still a monster beast comparable to a 9th-order Cloud River Realm cultivator. If Lu Yi didn't have a foundation that far surpassed cultivators of the same level, he wouldn't have been able to block her attack. Bloody wounds constantly appeared on his body. The Heart's Eye secret technique could indeed allow him to react correctly to dangers within a foot of him, but the foxfire's impact on his mind was unavoidable. Many times, he simply couldn't react in time. This can't go on. Even if Lu Yi knew that the fox demon was an arrow at the end of its flight and couldn't maintain this kind of attack for long, it was hard to say who would die first if this continued. I have to find a way to resolve the foxfire's impact on me. But is there any way to resolve this strange foxfire? Lu Ye's mind raced as he suddenly realized something. No matter why the foxfire could affect one's mind, it was still a ball of fire. Since it's fire, there's no reason for me to fear it. He recalled the scene of him entering the Land of Fire on the Spirit Stream battlefield. The Land of Fire and the 10,000 Poison Forest were both sacred grounds of the Spirit Stream battlefield. It was difficult for cultivators to penetrate them. Some Spirit Stream realm cultivators with strong foundations might be able to set foot on the periphery of these two sacred grounds, but no one had ever been able to enter their depths. Especially in the Land of Fire, even the Overlord-level Banshee found it difficult to approach. One had to know that the Overlord-level Banshee was a fire attribute monster beast. But Lu Yi had gone in, and not only had he only been a 7th-order heaven cultivator at the time, he had even obtained the Phoenix True Fire and activated the Fire Phoenix Spirit Tattoo on his talent tree. The reason he was able to enter the heart of the Land of Fire was not because of his own cultivation, but because of his talent tree. At that time, when he was in a difficult situation, he suddenly had an idea and activated the talent tree's power, allowing the talent tree's invisible roots to cover his entire body, isolating him from the cruel environment of the Land of Fire. The talent tree's power could even isolate an environment like the Land of Fire. Could it also isolate the foxfire's impact on him? If it could, then his mind would no longer be affected by the foxfire, and he would be able to freely kill the monster fox. With a thought, Lu Yi immediately activated the talent tree. As he immersed his mind, he saw the talent tree that was entrenched in his source spirit aperture suddenly grow roots, then spread out, as if probing into an unknown space, and disappeared. If Lu Yi activated the Insight Spirit Tattoo at this moment to inspect his body, he would see many root-like things all over his body, gently swaying along with the flow of his spirit chi. His mind seemed to be weighed down by a heavy burden, and the power of his mind was rapidly being consumed. Activating the talent tree did not consume his spirit chi, but the power of his mind. Usually, when Lu Yi let the talent tree devour the earth fire, the consumption was very small, but at this moment, the consumption was more than 100 times higher than usual. After all, his whole body was wrapped in the roots of the talent tree, and when he devoured the earth fire, only a few roots spread out from his body. He suddenly opened his eyes and saw the crazy and persistent green eyes of the monster fox, who was moving and jumping not far in front of him, interfering with his judgment. With the support of wind travel, his figure rushed out, directly facing the foxfire in front of him. Fight a quick battle. The monster fox did not know what happened to Lu Ye's body. Seeing Lu Yi actually take the initiative to crash into her foxfire, she was shocked and angry, and her beautiful figure jumped up to meet Lu Yi. However, in the next moment, the monster fox was wrapped in a chill. It was because Lu Ye's figure rushed out from the foxfire, and no matter how the foxfire exploded on his body, his firm eyes did not waver. Impossible! In shock, the monster fox actually spoke human language. However, for a demonic beast like her who could transform into human form, even in the state of her true body, it was not difficult to speak human language. She knew the power of her foxfire. If an ordinary Cloud River tier cultivator touched it, they would immediately fall into an illusion and be unable to extricate themselves. The shortest would be 3 to 5 breaths, and the longest would be 10 breaths. However, this traitor who betrayed her and the Fox Celestial Valley had shown a great resistance to her foxfire before, and her foxfire had only affected him for a moment. This could be explained by his mind being strong enough, but how could he not be affected at all? Could the power of his mind be comparable to the spirit ocean tier? However, from the other party's calm eyes, he was indeed not affected at all. While the monster fox was shocked, the distance between the man and the fox had been shortened to the limit. The bright light of a blade flashed in the monster fox's vision, and she only felt a pain in front of her. The huge impact sent her flying, blood splattering in the air, and she fell in a sorry state. In the blink of an eye, a figure had already landed in front of her, carrying a murderous aura. The power of the blade enveloped her like a storm, and each strike was fatal. The foxfire reappeared, but this time it could not cause the slightest disturbance to Lu Yi. Without the foxfire to rely on, the monster fox, who was also an arrow at the end of its flight, had no power to resist this kind of attack. Blood splattered, and the sound of the blade slicing through flesh rang out. Her snow-white fur was dyed red by the dark red blood, and the shocking color rendered her incomparably miserable. As Lu Yi swung the blade again, the monster fox fell heavily to the ground. This time, she was unable to stand up. She lay there, gasping for air, and the light in her eyes had become extremely dim. Lu Yi held the mountain pan blade and stepped forward, looking down at the monster fox in front of him. The monster fox turned her eyes, but her vision was blurry. She could no longer see Lu Ye's face clearly, and could only make out a vague outline. So, the heavens have already punished me. In the last moment of her life, she seemed to have understood something, and she muttered to herself. In these past years, she had continuously used her soul secret technique to enslave cultivators on the Cloud River battlefield. Those who dared to enter the depths of the Great Mang Mountains were all outstanding cultivators of the Cloud River tier. In the past 18 years, if not 1,000 cultivators had died because of her, then at least 800. As the number of cultivators she enslaved increased, the inexplicable sense of danger became more and more intense. She knew that one day, the heavens would punish her for her actions. She had originally thought that it would be a punishment similar to the soul-extinguishing divine lightning on the Spirit Stream battlefield. However, she had never imagined that this punishment would be handed down in such a way, and under such circumstances that she was completely unaware of. It was not until the last moment of her life that she finally understood the truth. Lu Yi stood in front of the monster fox, and could sense her current state, but the words that came out of her mouth puzzled him greatly. However, he did not delve too deeply into it, and simply treated it as the monster fox's last words. He raised the mountain pan blade high. "That's fine too." A flash of blade light appeared in her vision, and the monster fox felt relieved. No matter what, she had avenged her master. Perhaps this could be considered the final gift from the heavens. "Master, Sienner has come to accompany you." Chapter 592. In the 9-front array, as Lu Ye's saber fell, the fox monster's head was separated, and its vitality was completely destroyed. He let out a long breath and shook off the blood on the mountain plate saber. His mind relaxed, and his body staggered slightly. The battle with the fox monster was not dangerous. It was mainly because he had used up too much of his mental strength in a short period of time, which made him feel a little tired. His body was covered in wounds, but none of them hurt his muscles or bones. With his physique, it would not be difficult for him to recover. What's the situation? What's the situation outside?" Lu Yi asked. Logically speaking, the fox monster was dead. According to the soul secret technique she planted, it should have been broken by itself. But if that was not the case, he could not be sure. Yi's voice quickly entered his ears. "Everyone has returned to normal, but a few cultivators from Myriad Demon Ridge ran away immediately, including Xiao Yang and Tan Xing. That dog reacted quickly." Lu Yi secretly gritted his teeth. Originally, he planned to kill Tan Xing and Xiao Yang after killing the fox monster. Although he had been cultivating with Xiao Yang during this period of time, he had never forgotten the hatred between them. If he was not taken into the 9-front array, He could immediately interfere with the battlefield after killing the fox monster, but he was in the 9 front array, so he could not control the situation outside. Xiao Yang and Tan Xing knew the wolf pack. After all, they had suffered a big loss in the spirit land. So, after getting rid of the fox monster's control, the first thing they did was to escape. Both of them were in the 9th order. If they wanted to escape, the wolf pack really did not have any good ideas. Although it was a pity, they could only accept it. Lu Yi took a few steps forward. He walked to the fox monster's corpse. He searched the corpse for a while. He found a storage bag. This was the fox monster's storage bag. She had always carried it with her. Now that she was dead, it naturally became Lu Ye's spoils of war. Lu Yi didn't know how many good things she had. The only thing he knew was that there was a demonic core of an overlord-class demonic beast. The demonic core she obtained from killing the giant berserk ape was kept in her storage pouch. This was a rare good thing that was hard to come by in 100 years. The overlord-level demon beasts of the Cloud River battlefield had rarely been killed since ancient times. Just by looking at the operation of the Fox Immortal Valley, it was clear that if the cultivators were to form a group to deal with them, without a formation of 200 to 300 people, it would be impossible to succeed. Furthermore, it would be accompanied by a huge loss. It was simply not worth it. Therefore, cultivators would not provoke the overlord-level demonic beasts on the Cloudy River battlefield, let alone kill them. This time, they were able to kill the giant berserk ape because of the fox demon's hatred. The cultivators were also imbued with her soul's secret technique, which made them fearless of death. Moreover, Lu Yi and Xie Yunhan had set up many formations in advance to assist them. Just by holding the monster core of such an overlord-level monster beast in his hand, Lu Yi could feel the vigorous energy within. If he gave it to Hu Pe to swallow and refine, it would definitely be of great benefit. The spoils of war were naturally not limited to this. Lu Yi placed his hand on the demon fox's corpse and silently examined it for a moment. Then, he raised his Pan Shan saber and stabbed it down. A moment later, another demon core was extracted. This was the demon fox's demon core. Although it couldn't compare to the monster core of an overlord-level monster beast, it was still quite valuable. After wiping away the bloodstains on the demon core, Lu Yi looked at it in astonishment. The demon core was only the size of an infant's fist. It was a strange pink color and emitted a faint glow, as if it was a burning flame. This was pill fire? Pill fire wasn't a flame used for alchemy, but rather the monster core of a fire attribute monster beast. Lu Yi had bought quite a few of them in the Tianji treasury and had let his talent tree devour them. Thinking about it carefully, this demon fox had used a fox fire that could shake one's mind when fighting with him. It could indeed be considered a fire attribute monster beast. In the Tianji treasury, there were all kinds of pill fires with different prices. There were several hundred thousands and tens of thousands of merit points. There was even a strange flame called the Extreme Cold Ice Flame that was worth a total of 180,000 merit points. He didn't know how much this demon fox's demon core was worth, but it shouldn't be too expensive. Since it was a pill fire, he could naturally devour it. With a thought from Lu Yi, several roots grew out from his talent tree and extended into an invisible space. In the next moment, the luster of the pill fire in his hand quickly dimmed as its energy was devoured by the talent tree. Immersing himself in investigating the changes in his talent tree was just a habit. Lu Yi didn't expect a demon core to cause too much of a change in his talent tree. But what surprised him was that, as the demon core devoured the demon core's energy, a leaf near the top of the talent tree suddenly reacted and began to burn at a speed visible to the naked eye. Different from the blazing flames of the other leaves, this leaf burned with the same pink color as the demon fox's demon core. This was the first time Lu Yi had encountered something like this. He was momentarily stunned. A moment later, the demon core in his hand was exhausted and turned into dust. A leaf burning with pink flames appeared on his talent tree, making it stand out from the crowd. Lu Yi faintly felt that he had misjudged the value of the demon fox's demon core. After all, it was the demon core of a six-tailed heavenly fox. It couldn't be taken lightly. Just from the fact that it could cause such a change in his talent tree, one could tell that the demon core was extremely valuable. Lu Yi suppressed the doubts in his heart. He didn't immediately investigate the information contained within the burning leaf. Now that he was injured and his mental strength was severely depleted, there were still many things waiting for him to deal with outside. He couldn't afford to delay. Lu Yi called out softly. Yi understood tacitly and activated the power of the nine-front formation. In the next moment, Lu Ye's figure was expelled from the nine-front formation. Just as he steadied himself, Hoopa scurried over from the side and squatted on his shoulder. Hoopa was very shrewd. When the demon fox enslaved giant armor with a glance, it jumped off Lu Ye's body and hid far away. It was afraid that it would be enslaved by the demon fox. There were no more sounds of fighting in the surroundings. Many demon wolves were quietly guarding the side. The remaining cultivators of Fox Immortal Valley were also gathered together, their faces filled with sorrow. When their minds were enslaved by the demon fox, they didn't feel that their actions were wrong. However, when the demon fox died and their soul secret technique was broken, their experiences over the years immediately surged into their minds. They all asked themselves, "What have I done?" This was especially true for Xie. He had stayed in Fox Immortal Valley for a total of 12 years. He had completely cut off contact with his sect and family. His cultivation hadn't improved much and he had wasted his time. Although the others hadn't stayed as long as Xie, they had at least spent a year or two. When they thought of their days in Fox Immortal Valley, they all felt ashamed and uneasy. When they saw Lu Yi appear, everyone gathered around him. Fellow Taoist Lu Zhou Yuntian, who was covered in blood, bowed to Lu Yi and asked somewhat nervously, "Is that demon fox dead?" Although they knew that the demon fox was definitely dead the moment their soul secret technique was broken, they didn't dare to be certain before they received an answer. The demon fox had left too much psychological trauma on them. "I've killed the demon fox." "Fellow Taoists, you don't have to worry," Lu Yi said. Not only was the demon fox killed, but its demon core had also been devoured by the talent tree. He just didn't know if he could obtain any new spirit runes. Hearing this, everyone heaved a long sigh of relief. Their nervous expressions relaxed a lot. Zhou Yuntian bowed again. "We were trapped and were unknowingly deceived by the demon fox. This time, it's all thanks to fellow Taoist Lu for saving us. Such kindness is equivalent to giving us a new lease of life. If fellow Taoist has any instructions in the future, we won't dare to disobey." The others also bowed solemnly and expressed their gratitude. Lu Yi returned the bow. "Fellow Taoists, you don't have to be so polite. I was just saving myself. It's a pity that many of you lost your lives in the end." Xie Yunhan sighed. "It's fate. Brother Lu, it's already very impressive that you can save us." Although everyone didn't know how Lu Yi had the ability to command such a pack of wolves to help in the battle, no matter how powerful and numerous the wolves were, they might not be able to do anything against the power of the Fox Immortal Valley at its peak. Lu Ye's choice to make a move after the bloody battle with the giant berserk ape in the Fox Immortal Valley was undoubtedly the wisest choice. Moreover, when the demon wolves besieged them, they had clearly received orders in advance to only surround them and not kill them. Otherwise, there probably wouldn't be many people standing here now. No matter what, we've finally escaped the demon fox's control. This is a blessing. Everyone, you don't have to be so worried. Think about your sect, think about your brothers and sisters. In the future, we don't have to be slaves anymore, Zhou Yuntian said. Someone said faintly, "Fellow Taoist Zhou, now that you mention it, I miss home." Everyone suddenly fell silent as a look of longing appeared in their eyes. In the Fox Immortal Valley, with the demon fox's orders, no one dared to communicate with the outside world. All these years, The relatives and friends of the Fox Immortal Valley cultivators had been searching for them and sending them messages. Previously, when they were under the demon fox's control, they didn't think much of it. Now that they were free, a tsunami-like longing immediately surged up. Then, let's go home? Someone whispered softly. Zhou Yuntian raised his arm and shouted, if we don't go back now, then when? Once the longing surged up, it could no longer be controlled. Everyone couldn't wait to return to their sex, their hometowns, and tell their families about the pain of separation. Let's go home, someone shouted. For a moment everyone was excited. Zhou Yuntian turned to look at Lu Yi. Fellow Taoist Lu, what do you plan to do? Lu Yi thought for a moment. Senior brother and I just entered the Cloudy River battlefield not long ago, so we won't be returning for the time being. Moreover, I'm still injured and need to rest for a while. Fellow Taoists, please feel free to leave. Zhou Yuntian originally wanted to persuade Lu Yi to leave with them. After all, this was the depths of the Great Mang Mountains, and there were many powerful demon beasts. However, he suddenly remembered that Lu Yi had a pack of demon wolves protecting him, so there shouldn't be any danger. He didn't say anything else and nodded. Since that's the case, fellow Taoist Lu, please take care. If you need help in the future, just let me know. Everyone said their goodbyes to Lu Yi and exchanged their battlefield imprints with him. A moment later, many cultivators flew up on their artifacts and quickly left under the gazes of Lu Yi, Li Baxian, and the others. This group of people all had decent cultivations, so as long as they didn't encounter any overlord demon beasts, they wouldn't be in any danger. Almost at the same time that Zhou Yuntian and the others left, Lu Yi suddenly had a strange feeling. It was as if something had fallen from the sky and landed on his body. The back of his hand also felt slightly warm. Chapter 593. The strange feeling that suddenly fell from the sky was familiar, as if he had encountered it somewhere before. Lu Yi carefully thought about it, and quickly realized what this familiar feeling was. This was the blessing of heaven. Back in the hidden realm of the 10,000 beasts, he had obtained the Beast Seal Technique and Life Origin Technique from the 10,000 Beasts Sect's Grand Elder. Xia Qianqian had told him that if he sold these things that could change the situation of a sect to the hidden realm of heavens, he would receive the blessing of heaven. It would increase his own fortune. Reality proved that this was indeed the case. After leaving the hidden realm of the 10,000 beasts, he had sold the Jade Slip with the Beast Seal Technique and Life Origin Technique to the hidden realm of heavens. Not only had he received many merits, but he had also received the blessing of heaven. It was the same feeling as before. The main reason he had been able to turn misfortune into fortune in the hunting ground was because he had obtained a golden body medallion. However, such a heaven-defying treasure like the golden body medallion was extremely precious. It was something that even cultivators of the divine sea realm would covet, yet he, a mere cultivator of the Cloud River realm, had obtained it. Moreover, he had obtained it from the spoils of war. Not only had he turned misfortune into fortune, but he had also obtained first place on the hunting grounds bounty list, receiving a reward from heaven. Wasn't all of this a manifestation of his own fortune? Although luck was something that could not be seen or touched, it was constantly affecting him. Last time, he had obtained the blessing of heaven because he had brought out something that could change the situation of a sect from the hidden realm of the 10,000 beasts. But this time, he had killed the fox demon and saved those cultivators, and he also received a reward? He suddenly recalled the inexplicable words the fox demon had said before she died. So heaven has already sent down its punishment. Lu Yi didn't know what she had meant, but now that he combined it with his own experience, he vaguely understood. The fox demon had been tyrannical in the Fox Immortal Valley for 20 years. She had used a sole secret technique that should not have appeared on the Cloud River battlefield to enslave many cultivators and avenge her. Over the years, countless cultivators had died because of her. Although he had killed her to protect himself and save Li Baxian, in the end, it could be considered a blessing. He had not killed the fox demon this time. In the future, there might be even more cultivators who would be unlucky enough to suffer. The reason why he entered the Fox Immortal Valley was because he had followed Li Baxian to chase after Tan Xing and Xiaoliang, and encountered Zhou Yuntian and the others. Now that he thought about it, when Tan Xing and Xiaoliang escaped from the spiritual land, they should have fled to the outskirts of the Great Mang Mountains. But for some reason, the two of them actually fled to the depths of the Great Mang Mountains. This was obviously not in line with the situation the two of them were in at the time, and no matter what, two Cloud River Ninth Order cultivators should not have made such a foolish decision. He and Li Baxian chased them all the way until they encountered Zhou Yuntian and the others. Then, they were brought into the Fox Immortal Valley. Coincidentally, he had the talent tree and was not affected by the fox demon's soul mystic technique. Even more coincidentally, he had a pack of wolves that he could command. Even the battle against the giant berserk ape in Fox Immortal Valley was unbelievably smooth. The fox demon had not been able to get her revenge for 20 years, and not long after Lu Yi came to Fox Immortal Valley, she helped her complete her revenge plan. Everything seemed reasonable, but if one thought about it carefully, one would discover that there were many incomprehensible coincidences. It was as if there was a pair of invisible hands pushing everything from behind. Heavenly mystery. What in the world is that? Was he the punishment given to the fox demon by Heaven's secret? He had killed the fox demon and resolved this calamity. Was that why the heavens had once again favored him? As his thoughts churned, Lu Yi suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. He lowered his head and looked at the back of his hand. When Heaven's secret blessed him, he felt a slight warmth on the back of his hand. Looking at it now, Lu Yi was surprised, because a golden mark had appeared on the back of his hand. It was exactly the same as the mark given to him by Heaven's secret when he got first place on the hunting list. Not only did Heaven's secret bless him, but it also gave him a reward? However, Lu Yi did not know what this reward was. The reward for getting first place on the hunting list was obvious. As for what this reward was, he would have to return to the Spirit Land and borrow the Heaven's secret pillar to find out. Collecting his thoughts, Lu Yi looked to the side. Giant Armor was standing there with his eyebrows lowered, looking unhappy. Obviously, he was still angry about how he attacked Lu Yi and chased after Yi. Dispelling the distracting thoughts in his mind, Lu Yi stepped forward and patted his shoulder, comforting him. Don't mind it. Even fourth senior brother couldn't resist the fox demon's secret technique, let alone you. Giant Armor looked up at him. Although he was still silent, his expression was much more relaxed. Lu Yi turned to look at Li Baxian, only to see Feng Yuechan smiling. Senior brother, what's up with that fellow Taoist you? She seems to have a good relationship with you? Before the group of Fox Immortal Valley cultivators left, Yu Daiwei deliberately said goodbye to Li Baxian. Feng Yuechan saw the difference in her expression and tone, which made her furious. Li Baxian's expression did not change. She's also a sword cultivator. When we were in Fox Immortal Valley, she often came to spar with me. Actually, I'm not very familiar with her. TSK, why am I telling you this? Also, I'm your martial uncle. What are you shouting for? He raised his hand and hammered Feng Yuechan's head. Feng Yuechan's cheeks puffed up slightly, looking angry. Li Baxian walked towards Lu Yi and asked with concern, "How are your injuries, junior brother?" "They're all flesh wounds. It's not a big deal." Li Baxian sighed. "I didn't expect there to be such a dangerous monster beast in the Cloud River battlefield. When she enslaved me with the soul secret technique, I didn't feel anything wrong at all. Now that I think about it, it's really scary. Speaking of which, junior brother, how did you get rid of that soul secret technique?" This was what he didn't understand the most. When he was brought back with Lu Yi and the others that day, logically speaking, they should all have been implanted with a soul secret technique, but Lu Yi hadn't shown any flaws these days. It wasn't until today that he learned that his little junior brother had never been affected by the fox monster's soul secret technique and had been secretly plotting to kill it. Before Lu Yi could answer, Feng Yuechan spoke first. Stupid senior brother, have you forgotten how powerful junior brother Lu's soul secret technique is? That soul secret technique was just a monster general. Even if it could use the soul secret technique, it wouldn't affect junior brother Lu at all. Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan both knew that Lu Yi had obtained a lot of soul cleansing water. Soul cleansing water was a divine item that could strengthen a cultivator's soul. Li Baxian had also received some from Lu Yi. Lu Yi had the ability to give it to others, which meant he must have used a lot of it himself. Feng Yuechan naturally thought that Lu Yi being able to get rid of the soul-cleansing water was related to his powerful soul. This was something Lu Yi was happy to see. He couldn't explain too much about his talent tree, so he followed Feng Yuechan's words and said, "Senior sister Feng is right. But this time, it's all thanks to junior brother. Otherwise, I'm afraid I wouldn't have survived." Feng Yuechan said, "Junior brother is still injured. Let him heal first. Senior brother has something to ask you. Come with me." Li Baxian frowned, but before he could speak, Feng Yuechan pulled him aside. Lu Yi shook his head and smiled, but he really needed to rest for a while. With the wolves guarding him, there was no need to worry about any danger. Finding a place, he sat down cross-legged and threw some spirit pills and a healing pill into his mouth, silently refining them. Half a day later, he had more or less recovered his spirit energy. Lu Yi immersed his mind and checked the pink leaf on the talent tree. Focusing his mind, a large amount of information surged into his mind, causing his mind to tremble slightly. Carefully checking the information, Lu Yi had a strange expression. He was quite lucky this time to obtain a spirit rune. However, this spirit rune was different from all the spirit runes he had obtained before. It wasn't that it was complicated. Among the spirit runes that Lu Yi had grasped, the most complicated one was undoubtedly the Fire Phoenix spirit rune, followed by the Void spirit rune. However, he learned the Void spirit rune from a book, so he couldn't construct it as casually as the talent tree. Furthermore, it was just a leaf carrying information, so it couldn't be that complicated. The reason why it was special was because from the information, this spirit rune didn't consume spirit energy, but soul energy. To put it simply, it consumed soul energy. Lu Ye's mind trembled slightly. This was actually a soul spirit rune, which was also a divine rune. The way of spirit runes was broad and profound. What Lu Yi had learned now could be constructed with spirit energy. However, if Lu Ye's cultivation reached the divine sea realm and he had his own soul energy, then many spirit runes could be constructed with soul energy and could exert more power. For example, sharpness could be constructed with spirit runes to increase the lethality of spirit runes. However, if it was constructed with soul energy, it could be turned into a soul attack. Defense could also be constructed with soul energy, which could be turned into a soul barrier. However, there were some special spirit runes that could only be constructed with soul energy. Such spirit runes were called divine runes. This time, he obtained a divine rune. Charm. Judging from the information contained in the leaf, this charm divine rune had the effect of confusing people's minds, which was similar to the soul secret skill performed by the fox demon. The soul secret skill of the fox demon was heaven-defying, but that was the innate ability of the six-tailed heavenly fox. It was impossible for ordinary cultivators or demonic beasts to grasp it. If the charm divine rune could exert 10% of the fox demon's soul secret skill's power, it would be extremely impressive. Unfortunately, this was a divine pattern that could only be activated with soul power. Lu Ye's current cultivation level was only at the Cloud River tier, so he couldn't use it at all. He could use his spiritual power to construct the divine pattern, but even if he managed to construct it, it wouldn't be of any use. However, one day, his cultivation would reach the divine sea realm. At that time, this divine rune would naturally be of use. Just this divine rune alone had given him a great harvest, not to mention that he had also obtained the blessing of heaven. His luck would probably be even more prosperous in the future. There was also a reward from heaven, but he didn't know what it was. Lu Yi slowly opened his eyes and stood up. Li Baxin was guarding at the side. Seeing him stand up, he asked, "Little junior brother, are you returning to the spirit land?" The fox demon was dead, and the cultivators of Fox Immortal Valley had dispersed. There was no need to return to Fox Immortal Valley. Lu Yi nodded. Suddenly, he remembered something. "Let's make a trip to Fox Immortal Valley. There's something there that I'm interested in." Li Baxin didn't ask what it was. He only nodded. Okay. Chapter 594. Returning to the Fox Immortal Valley, his state of mind was completely different. So this is the Fox Immortal Valley. It's quite beautiful. Feng Yuechan stood in the air and looked down. In terms of scenery, the Fox Immortal Valley was indeed not bad. After all, it was the place where the fox demon had lived for a long time. However, it was still inferior to the spiritual land. Being used to the beautiful scenery of the spiritual land, Feng Yuechan's evaluation of the Fox Immortal Valley was only quite beautiful. "Junior brother, why are you back here?" Li Baxin asked. "There's a place that I'm a little concerned about," Lu Yi said as he led the way. The few of them followed. A moment later, they arrived at a place enveloped by a large formation. Li Baxin was deep in thought. This is a forbidden area? Although he and Lu Yi had only stayed in the Fox Immortal Valley for more than a month, he had heard of the forbidden area. More than one cultivator had told him that he could go anywhere in the Fox Immortal Valley except for two places. One was the fox demon's bedroom, and no one could enter without permission. The other was the forbidden area in the deepest part of the Fox Immortal Valley. At the very least, there was still a chance to enter the fox demon's bedroom. However, no one in the Fox Immortal Valley knew what was going on in the forbidden area. Even Xie Yunhan, who was in charge of the entire Fox Immortal Valley's formation, did not know. This was because the fox demon had ordered that no one was allowed to set foot in this place, not even within 1,000 feet of it. Li Baxin finally understood why Lu Yi wanted to come back. To be honest, he was also somewhat interested in this forbidden area. Only the unknown could arouse curiosity. Lu Yi stood in front of the formation and observed the nodes of the formation with his eyes enhanced by the insight spirit patterns. A moment later, he raised his hand and threw out a few formation flags. The last time he came, he had relied on his attainments in Formation Dao to sneak into this formation, so he did not cause any damage to this formation. But this time there was no need. Strictly speaking, the strength of the formation here was not high. To him, cracking it was not difficult. Formation flags were thrown out one by one and embedded into the node. Lu Yi raised his hand and pressed on the formation. As he channeled his spirit energy, the spirit energy on the formation's light screen flowed slower and slower until it completely stopped. The weapon box at his waist buzzed, and 9 streams of light shot out one after another, blasting towards a certain part of the formation. Accompanied by cracking sounds like a mirror-shattering, spiderweb-like cracks immediately appeared on the formation. After 3 breaths, it completely shattered. The area enveloped by the Great Formation also appeared in their field of vision. A tomb, an ancient altar. Why is there a tomb here? Feng Yuechan curiously went forward to investigate and saw a tombstone erected in front of the grave. There was a line of words on the tombstone. The tomb Feng Yuechan. This Lei Jingyin should be the original master of the fox demon. However, for some unknown reason, she was killed by the giant raging ape. Therefore, since 20 years ago, the fox demon began its revenge plan. All these years, it has been collecting cultivators until today. Lu Yi casually explained. Li Baxin said thoughtfully, "Junior brother has been here before?" Lu Yi said, Once, out of curiosity, I snuck in and happened to bump into a fox demon offering condolences here. I overheard something. I see. Li Baxian nodded. This tomb was made by Lu Yi. There's nothing special about it. What I care about is the altar. As Lu Yi spoke, he stepped forward and walked up to the altar. Senior brother, senior sister Feng, can you see what this altar is for? Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan walked up together and looked at it carefully. After a while, Li Baxian shook his head. I can't see, but there are 4 grooves. They should be for spirit stones. Maybe if enough spirit stones are placed, it will open something. Open what? A secret realm? Feng Yuechan guessed. Lu Yi and Li Baxian's interest was piqued. If this altar could really open a secret realm, then they wouldn't want to miss it. There were many secret realms in the Cloud River battlefield, so Feng Yuechan's guess might be true. Let's give it a try, Lu Yi said excitedly. The 4 of them each took a corner, took out spirit stones from their storage bags, and placed them in the groove. A shocking scene appeared. As soon as the mid-grade spirit stones were placed into the grooves, the spirit energy within them was sucked dry in an extremely short amount of time, turning them into useless stones. After absorbing the spirit chi from the spirit stones, the complex patterns on the surface of the altar lit up a small area. This area only occupied an insignificant part of the entire altar, but it was enough to make Lu Yi and the others' eyes light up. Looking at each other, they each took out more spirit stones and placed them in the groove. The spirit stones turned into useless stones as their spirit energy was absorbed by the altar. The pattern on the altar lit up more and more, until a certain moment, when the 4 of them had consumed over 1,000 spirit stones, the surface of the altar shone brightly and all the patterns were completely lit up. At the same time, Lu Yi felt a slight warmth on the back of his hand. He quickly looked down and saw the golden mark on the back of his hand suddenly fly out, turning into a golden light and falling into the altar. In an instant, there was only a dazzling golden light in front of them, blinding them. After a few breaths of time, when Lu Yi and the others' vision recovered, there was an oval-shaped golden light curtain in front of them. Little junior brother, what was that just now? Li Baxian asked in surprise. He had clearly seen the strange phenomenon of the golden mark on the back of Lu Ye's hand falling onto the altar, but he didn't know what the golden mark was or why it had fallen onto the altar. Lu Yi reacted. So this is the reward bestowed by Heaven's secret. When he saw the golden mark, he thought it was the same as the one he had obtained in the hunting ground, so he needed to find a Heaven's secret pillar to investigate, but he did not expect the golden mark to be used to activate the altar. In other words, even if the people from Immortal Fox Valley returned here and found the altar and placed enough spirit stones, without his mark, they would not be able to activate the altar. Heaven's Secret's reward, it was bestowed to me after I killed a fox monster, Lu Yi explained simply. Li Baxian was stunned. Heaven's Secret bestowed a reward for killing a fox monster? This kind of thing was unheard of. Lu Yi told Li Baxian about his conjecture and the words the fox demon said before it died. Li Baxian nodded and said, if that's the case, junior brother killing the fox demon has indeed eliminated a huge threat on the Cloud River battlefield. It can be considered a blessing. It's understandable that the heavens bestowed a reward. Feng Yuechan's expression changed slightly. Since it is a reward bestowed by Heaven's Secret, there must be some benefits. Junior brother Lu, good people are truly rewarded. Lu Yi laughed. His main purpose in killing the fox monster was to save Li Baxian. If it were not for Li Baxian being enslaved by the fox monster, he would have secretly run away. Now that he had encountered so many things, it could be considered a freak combination of factors. Feng Yuechan looked at the golden light curtain with sparkling eyes. I wonder what is behind it? Li Baxian said, you said there are benefits, so there can't be anything bad. Little junior brother, why don't you go in and take a look? Lu Yi nodded, then suddenly thought of something and said, Giant Carapace, have the wolves guard the surroundings. Giant Carapace nodded, raised his hand to his mouth, and whistled loudly. In the next instant, a large pack of monster wolves rushed over under the lead of the alpha wolf, creating a great momentum. Giant Carapace casually drew a circle and said concisely, "Watch." The wolf pack immediately separated to the left and right, surrounding the area. Lu Yi clicked his tongue in amazement. Although his relationship with the wolf pack was not bad, he could not command them as easily as Giant Carapace. "Giant Carapace, lead the way," Lu Yi ordered. Although this was a reward from Heaven's secret and there was most likely no danger, it was still best to be careful. Among them, Giant Carapace's physique was the strongest, so it was naturally better for him to lead the way. Giant Carapace did not say a word, taking large strides towards the golden light curtain, arriving in front of it in a few steps, and plunging in without hesitation. Lu Ye's gaze did not move, only to see a layer of ripples appear on the golden light curtain, which then swallowed Giant Carapace whole. Lu Yi followed closely behind Giant Carapace, followed by Feng Yuechan and Li Baxian. Stepping into the golden light curtain, they instantly entered another world, but this world was hazy with fog. Giant Carapace, who had entered first, was not far in front of them, but under the hazy fog, Lu Yi could not see his figure clearly, only a vague outline. Lu Yi stood in place, his eyes filled with shock. This was because the surrounding environment gave him an incomparably familiar feeling. Behind him, Li Baxian quickly whispered, "Heaven's secret baptism?" Of the 4 people present, apart from Giant Carapace who had not yet entered the Spirit Stream list, the other 3 had all entered the Spirit Stream list, so the monthly Heaven's secret baptism was naturally not unfamiliar to them. The baptism bestowed by Heaven's fate would lead the cultivators on the Spirit Stream list to a completely independent and unique environment. Inside that unique environment, the cultivator's body and mind would be tempered to a certain degree, and thus become more powerful. It could be said that the future prospects of cultivators who had entered the Spirit Stream list and those who had not were different. Wei Kei was at the 9th Order Cloud River Realm, while Tan Xing and Xiaoliang were also at the 9th Order Cloud River Realm. Furthermore, without exception, all 3 of them had reached the Cloud River Realm with 360 apertures. However, compared to Tan Xing and Xiaoliang, Wei Kei's 9th Order strength was not just a little bit weaker. The most fundamental reason was that Tan Xing and Xiaoliang had both entered the Spirit Stream list before, and their rankings were not low. The Spirit Stream realm was the initial stage of a cultivator's cultivation, and was also the stage that laid the foundation for their entire cultivation journey. Being able to obtain the Heaven's secret baptism at this stage would undoubtedly strengthen a cultivator's foundation, and allow them to have a brighter future. The higher one's ranking on the Spirit Stream list, the greater the benefits of the Heaven's secret baptism would be. When Lu Yi was at the Spirit Stream realm, he could basically only kill people 1 level above him. However, after reaching the Cloud River realm, killing people 2 levels above him was not a difficult matter. Admittedly, this was related to the strength of Cloud River realm cultivators, but it was also related to the benefits he had obtained from the Spirit Stream list. One had to know that the higher a cultivator's cultivation, the more difficult it would be to kill people of a higher level. This was because the higher one's cultivation, the greater the increase in one's strength. Chapter 595. Only cultivators on the Spirit Stream list had the right to receive the Heavenly Fate baptism. There was no similar Cloud River list on the Cloud River battlefield, and no one had ever heard of a Cloud River tier cultivator receiving the Heavenly Fate baptism. Unexpectedly, Lu Yi and the others encountered it here. From the looks of it, activating the altar didn't lead to the Mystery Realm as Feng Yuechan had guessed. It was just a pure Heavenly Fate baptism. However, for Lu Yi and the others, this was the best and most practical reward. After a moment of excitement, Lu Yi suddenly realized a problem. He had received the Heavenly Fate baptism 4 times on the Spirit Stream battlefield, and each time, the effects were worse than the last. By the end of the fourth time, the effects were close to nothing. This was also why he had decisively advanced to the Cloud River tier. If he could obtain enough benefits, how could he leave the Spirit Stream battlefield? Not only him, but Li Baxin and Feng Yuechan were also like this. These two had occupied the Spirit Stream list for more than a decade, and they had heard that the heavenly fate baptism no longer affected them. They had occupied the Spirit Stream list for more than a decade, and there were no substantial rewards for them. Of the 4 people present, including Hu Po, only Giant Armor hadn't received the heavenly fate baptism. So, even if this place was a heavenly fate baptism, would it really be useful to them? If it was useless, then even if this place was a heavenly fate baptism, they wouldn't obtain any benefit. Li Baxin obviously also realized this problem, and was already silently refining the power around him. After a short while, his expression became excited. It's useful. Lu Yi also tried. He found that it was indeed as Li Baxin had said. The fog here was slightly different from the heavenly fate baptism on the Spirit Stream list. It was obviously more advanced. The heavenly fate baptism on the Spirit Stream list was useless to Lu Yi and the others. However, it was useful here. Let's disperse, Lu Yi said. Li Baxin and Feng Yuechan nodded in agreement. Giant Armor sat down cross-legged. He closed his eyes and cultivated. As he breathed, large amounts of dense white fog were sucked into his mouth and into his lungs. Lu Yi walked in a certain direction, but after walking for less than 300 feet, an invisible barrier blocked his path. He raised his hand to test it, and found that the barrier was extremely sturdy. It wasn't something he could shake with his current cultivation, so he turned around and walked to the side. After walking for another few hundred feet, as expected, another invisible barrier appeared in front of him. From the looks of it, this place wasn't very big, only a few hundred feet in length and width. Looking back, he could no longer see the figures of Li Baxin and the others. The thick white fog had blocked his line of sight. There was no need to continue exploring. Lu Yi sat down and began to construct a small spirit-gathering funnel on his body. He also came out of Hu Po's body in a flash. She walked to a spot 10 meters away from him and sat down to cultivate. Hu Po opened his mouth wide and began to devour the omnipresent mist. With the enhancement of the small energy-gathering funnels, the surrounding mist was attracted by an invisible force and continuously poured into Lu Ye's body. As the number of small energy-gathering funnels increased, the flow of mist around Lu Ye's body could be seen with the naked eye. His cultivation aptitude was indeed very poor. There was no way for him to inhale and exhale the spiritual qi of heaven and earth normally. He couldn't even draw out the spiritual qi of spirit stones. However, under his unique cultivation method and in such an environment, the benefits he could obtain were incomparable to anyone else. Back in the Dragon's Spring, in the Soul Cleansing Pond, he had used this cultivation method to obtain benefits that ordinary people couldn't even imagine. Although he could confirm that the white fog here was of a higher grade than the Spirit Stream list's heavenly mystery baptism, he couldn't tell by how much. Until now. Lu Yi revealed a look of surprise. It was because when the invisible energy from the surroundings surged into his body, every piece of his flesh and blood was wriggling slowly. This was a sign that his physique was strengthening. His mind felt as if it was floating in the clouds. His mind was also strengthening at an extremely impressive speed. Not only that, but the surging power poured into the river of spiritual qi in his body. While the river's volume increased, it also increased the speed of its flow. The heavenly mystery baptism here had the effect of increasing one's cultivation. The heavenly fortune baptism from the Spirit Stream list didn't have such an effect. During the Spirit Stream battlefield, Lu Yi had been baptized by the heavens 4 times, which had strengthened his body and mind. However, none of those baptisms had increased his cultivation base in the slightest. This place was different. Now that he thought about it, it actually made sense. Generally speaking, cultivators who could enter the spirit stream list had a cultivation base of the 9th heaven level. Within the spirit stream stage, that was the limit. Any higher and one could only reach the cloud river stage. Therefore, the heavenly mystery baptism of the spirit stream battlefield didn't have the effect of increasing one's cultivation base. Lu Yi was the first person in history to enter the spirit stream list with a cultivation base of the 7th heaven level, and first place with a cultivation base of the 8th heaven level. It could strengthen one's body and mind, and increase one's cultivation base. This heavenly mystery baptism was much, much better than the spirit stream list. He could foresee that after this, his strength would increase significantly. The only thing he didn't know was how long he would be able to cultivate here. Although this was a reward from the heavenly mystery baptism of the spirit stream list, it was impossible for him to cultivate here indefinitely. Realizing that, Lu Ye's thirst grew. While the few of them were cultivating here, within Taimong Mountain, 2 figures flew about in a sorry state. They were Xiao Yang and Tan Xing. After Lu Yi had killed the demon fox and dispelled the secret soul technique, the 2 of them had realized that they were in a bad situation. They immediately flew into the air and fled. "Brother Xia, let's take a break." Tan Xing gasped for breath. Today's encounter had been like a dream. First, they had fought a bloody battle with an overlord-level monster beast. Before they had fully recovered, they had been besieged by a pack of wolves. The 2 of them were able to survive not entirely due to luck, but more due to their powerful strength. After all, they were at the Cloud River 9th realm. Their foundation wasn't something ordinary cultivators could compare to. Even so, Tan Xing was almost an arrow at the end of its flight. Although Xiao Yang still had some strength left, he couldn't hold on for much longer. Seeing Tan Xing's sorry state, he nodded and said, "Then let's take a break." The 2 of them immediately descended and took out some spirit pills to recover their strength. After a while, Tan Xing recovered slightly. With a face full of fear, he said, "I didn't expect that there would be such a monster beast in the Cloud River battlefield." Thinking back to the month he spent in Fox Immortal Valley, Tan Xing felt like he was in a dream. When the Fox Demoness had planted a soul mystic technique in him to enslave his mind, he did not feel anything. It was only when the soul mystic technique was destroyed with the Fox Demoness death that he woke up from his dream. There are many strange things in the world. Although you and I are at the Cloud River realm, we still don't have enough experience. What I don't understand is how Lu Ye got rid of it. Considering everything that had happened before, Lu Ye had never been affected by the Demon Fox Immortal Valley's soul secret technique. Otherwise, he wouldn't have mobilized the wolf pack to attack them. Lu Ye must have planned this for a long time. Otherwise, the timing wouldn't have been so coincidental. It happened when the Fox Immortal Valley was fighting the Overlord monster beasts and their strength was greatly damaged. Xiao Yang was also thinking about this problem. He voiced his suspicion. There is only one possibility. That guy's soul is strong enough to resist the Demon Fox's soul secret technique. The corner of Tan Xing's eyes twitched. He's only at the Cloud River 4th realm. Even if his soul is strong, how strong can it be? Although he said that, he knew that this was the only reasonable explanation. The Demon Fox probably didn't expect that she would die at the hands of the weakest cultivator in the Fox Immortal Valley. Lu Ye did many things on the Spirit Stream battlefield that ordinary people can't do. He can't be underestimated. Since the last time, Xiao Yang had done an in-depth study of Lu Ye. When he saw all kinds of information about Lu Ye, he was really shocked. Since ancient times, there had never been a cultivator who could stir up such a big storm on the Spirit Stream battlefield. He had even single-handedly caused the sects in the core region to suffer again and again. Since ancient times, there had never been a cultivator with a Heaven 8th realm cultivation that occupied the Spirit Stream first place. Before this trip, he had already warned himself not to underestimate Lu Ye. but now it seemed that he had underestimated him. 3 Cloud River Ninth Realm cultivators had come together for revenge. Now that Wei Kei was dead, the two of them had fled like stray dogs. Tan Xing chuckled. Does this count as him saving our lives? Xiao Yang coldly snorted. Brother Tan, do you still want to be grateful to him? Tan Xing's expression turned cold. How is that possible? He killed my New Moon Sect's disciples and destroyed my New Moon Sect station. How could I forget? It's just that revenge is as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Even if they now knew the location of Lu Ye's spirit land, so what? The spirit land was covered by a spirit array and was guarded by a pack of wolves. Not to mention the two of them, even if they found dozens of helpers, they might not be able to succeed. With their connections, they would be able to find so many helpers. Even if there were hundreds of them, they would still be able to find them. But even so, could they really take down the spirit land and kill Lu Ye? Even if they could, they would definitely suffer heavy casualties. Xiao Yang clenched his fists, his knuckles cracking. He couldn't understand how Lu Ye could command such a pack of wolves. He also remembered how he had carefully guided Lu Ye's cultivation of the saber every day in Fox Immortal Valley. He had even taught him the Heart's Eye secret technique. The sullen feeling in his heart was about to overturn rivers and seas. That dog wasn't affected by the soul secret technique at all, but he used a chicken feather as an arrow to ask him for advice on saber technique. He was so stupid to teach him everything he knew. It's not just the two of us who want to take his life in Myriad Demon Ridge. Xiao Yang tried to calm down and said lightly. Brother Xia, you mean? Tan Xing said thoughtfully. If we secretly spread the location of Lu Ye's spirit land, there will always be people who will find trouble with him, especially those large spirit lands. In order to expand the scale of the spirit land and improve the grade of the spirit land, they are plundering spring spirits everywhere. The grade A spring spirits are very attractive to them, and with Lu Ye. He suddenly paused. I remember that there is a spirit land nearby that is dominated by Sacred Flame Sect cultivators. The Sacred Flame Sect hates the Jade Blood Sect more than anyone else. If those lunatics know Lu Ye's whereabouts, what do you think they will do? Chapter 596. More than 30 years ago, Sacred Flame Sect was a first-grade sect with an illustrious reputation, but now it was only a fourth-grade sect. The main reason was that all the Divine Sea Realm cultivators in the sect had been killed, and the instigator was Blue Blood Sect. In the war between the two camps, 3 first-grade sects on Myriad Demon Ridge's side were forcefully knocked off their pedestals. In addition to Sacred Flame Sect, there was also Golden Cloud Hall and 100 Refinements Valley. In terms of hatred for Blue Blood Sect, these 3 forces were the most intense. When Wei Yang first met Lu Ye, she had mentioned these 3 sects to him. Tan Xing's eyes lit up when he heard this. Driving the wolf to swallow the tiger, reaping the benefits of the fisherman. Brother Xia's plan is good. With their strength alone, there was no way they could pose any threat to Lu Ye. However, it was unrealistic for them to invite helpers for revenge. If they really did that, there would definitely be many casualties. After all, there were so many monster wolves in Lu Ye's spirit land. However, if those from Sacred Flame Sect knew about the situation in Lu Ye's spirit land, they would definitely take action. At that time, the two of them could hide in the dark and wait for an opportunity to take action. At the very least, they would be able to get a share of the pie. As for how to pass the news to Sacred Flame Sect without leaving a trace, it was naturally not difficult for the two of them. After a short rest, the two of them took off on their artifacts again and flew towards the periphery of Tai Mang Mountain. Along the way, they began to send out messages. Time passed. In the place of the Heaven's baptism, Lu Ye and the others cultivated separately. Originally, Lu Ye thought that he wouldn't be able to stay in this place for long, but to his surprise, until 3 days later. Suddenly, a powerful repulsive force came from all directions. He quickly got up. Before Lu Ye could do anything else, his vision suddenly blurred. He appeared directly on the altar. His body couldn't help but stagger. He hurriedly steadied himself. Looking up, Li Baxin, Feng Yuchan, Zhu Jia, and Hu Puyi were all expelled, their spirit qi surging. And judging from the spirit qi fluctuations on their bodies, their cultivation had obviously improved. Li Baxin and Feng Yuchan were originally 5th order Cloud River realm, but now they were 6th order. It had only been a month since their last breakthrough. The auras of Yi and Hu Pe had also reached the level of a 4th order master. Lu Yi and Zhu Jia had both reached the 5th order. Lu Yi had broken through a day ago. His cultivation speed in the baptism area was even higher than using the golden spirit stick. If he hadn't experienced it himself, he would have found it hard to believe. Little junior brother, do you feel it? Li Baxin gently clenched his fist, then opened it, then clenched it again, as if he was experiencing the increase in his strength. Lu Yi nodded. During these 3 days, he felt it the most clearly because he didn't need to immerse himself in cultivation. With the small spirit-gathering funnel continuously working, he didn't need to do anything. Naturally, he could continuously devour the white mist, and his efficiency was much higher than others. Li Baxin and the others were different. They had been immersed in their cultivation, and only now did they feel the changes in their bodies. This time, not only did his cultivation increase, but his body and mind had also become stronger. Moreover, the speed of the spirit qi river in his body had also become faster. Compared to before, the speed of the spirit qi river had increased by at least 30%. This was clearly the benefit of the heavenly fate baptism. An increase in cultivation meant an increase in strength, and with the strengthening of the spirit qi river and the strengthening of the spirit qi river, one's strength skyrocketed. It could be said that this time's cultivation wasn't as simple as just increasing a minor realm for everyone. Compared to 3 days ago, the change in their strength could be said to be earth-shaking. However, strength couldn't be reflected without experiencing a real life or death battle, so Lu Yi didn't know what level his current strength was at. Li Baxin still had a look of disbelief on his face. After a while, he sighed. The ancients say that when a man achieves the Tao, even his chickens and dogs can ascend to heaven. This time, it's all thanks to little junior brother killing that fox monster. If Lu Yi hadn't obtained the reward from the heavenly fate baptism for killing the fox monster, they wouldn't have had such an opportunity. As for the 1,000 mid-rank spirit stones they consumed to activate the altar, compared to the benefits they obtained, it was nothing. Forget 1,000, even 10,000 mid-rank spirit stones wouldn't be enough. What are you talking about, senior brother? I'm not, Feng Yuechan pouted, looking unhappy. Li Baxin laughed loudly. That's exactly what I mean. Feng Yuechan smiled sweetly and turned to look at Lu Yi. But I really have to thank you this time, junior brother Lu. With this opportunity, our future path of cultivation will definitely be easier and wider. These words were not wrong. Although the Cloud River tier was not the basic cultivation level for cultivators, the cultivation level of the Cloud River tier could not be considered high. The benefits that they had obtained this time could be said to have laid down a more solid foundation, which would be greatly beneficial to their future cultivation. We're family, senior sister, there's no need to be so formal, Lu Yi said with a smile. Feng Yuechan clearly misunderstood, and she looked up at Li Baxin, 2 streaks of red appearing on her face. This altar. Li Baxin turned to look at the altar. He originally wanted to wait a few days for his cultivation base to stabilize before coming back to cultivate, but when he looked at it, he found that the altar had already been shattered, and he swallowed the words he was about to say. Lu Yi also noticed the changes to the altar, and he said thoughtfully, "Looks like the reward from the heavenly fate baptism is a one-time thing. Speaking of which, even if the altar was not damaged, without the golden seal from Tianji, there was no way to reactivate the altar. Furthermore, there was such an altar in the depths of Fox Immortal Valley. From the looks of it, it was a reward prepared by the heavens." Let's return to the spiritual land. Li Baxian said. With the altar destroyed, there was no need to stay in Fox Immortal Valley. A moment later, a few streams of light shot up into the sky and headed straight for the spiritual land. On the ground, the pack of wolves followed closely behind. Little junior brother, is there something on your mind? Li Baxian leaned over and asked. Lu Yi said, Tan Xing and Xiaoliang are not dead. The location of the spiritual land has been exposed. They will definitely make a comeback. Li Baxian's expression also sank. It was indeed a pity that they could not kill Xiaoliang and Tan Xing. When Feng Yuechan and Giant Armor led the pack of wolves to help, they had already ordered the wolves to only surround them and not kill them except for Xiaoliang and Tan Xing, because there was no way to determine which camp the others belonged to. If they really fought to the death, the wolf pack would definitely suffer a lot of losses. Although the order was given, the wolves were not cultivators, and their intelligence was not high. At that time, Feng Yuechan had to restrain Li Baxian, and Giant Armor was enslaved by the fox demon using a soul secret technique. In the chaos, Tan Xing and Xiaoliang managed to survive. After all, the two of them were ninth-order cultivators and were not easy to kill. Last time, they were unaware of the existence of the wolf pack and suffered a great loss. Not only were the two of them seriously injured, even Wei Kei was killed. Now they were clear about the power of the spiritual land. If they really wanted to make a comeback, they would definitely be prepared. It might not be that bad. Li Baxian shook his head. What do you mean? Li Baxian said, since they know about the power of our spiritual land, they must also know that it is useless to bring fewer people. But even if they bring enough people, they will definitely suffer heavy casualties. This is something they can't accept. If they want to crush our spiritual land, they will need at least 100 people. What if they really bring 100 people? Li Baxian frowned slightly. They won't. Just the hatred between them may not make them act like this, but senior brother, don't forget that I still have a huge bounty on my head. Since ancient times, wealth has moved people's hearts. Taking a step back, even if they simply leak the location of the spiritual land, we will have endless trouble in the future. Little junior brother means. Lu Yi fell silent. He thought that the spiritual land was located in the depths of Tai Mang Mountain and was guarded by the wolf pack, so he could sit back and relax. But he did not expect that it would be so troublesome in such a short time. Thinking back to the C-grade spiritual land he obtained last time, he was not able to occupy it for long. In the end, after entering the Myriad Beast Realm's secret realm, it was robbed. In any case, he was someone who was blessed by the heavens, so why did it seem like he was not fated to have a spiritual land? There are two options: move the spiritual land or leave a way out. Move the spiritual land. Li Baxian shook his head. There is a Tianji pillar in the spiritual land that little junior brother brought. If we move it, we will waste 100,000 contribution points. Moreover, moving the spiritual land will cause the spring spirit's grade to drop. Lu Yi was stunned. Moving the spiritual land will cause the spring spirit's grade to drop. He really did not know about this. Li Baxian nodded. Although there is a way to take the spring spirit out again, every time it is taken out, the spring spirit's grade will drop by a grade. In other words, if we move the spiritual land, we will only get a B-grade spiritual land, and lose a Tianji pillar. In other words, when the spring spirit of the C-grade spiritual land was stolen, they could only get a D-grade spring spirit. What a waste. And so unless we have no other choice, we should not move the spiritual land. Lu Yi nodded. Then we can only leave a way out. After we return, I will arrange a few more transmission arrays, just in case. With the transmission arrays, even if the spiritual land was really breached, their safety would be guaranteed to a certain extent. In the hunting ground, when Lu Yi was a third-order river realm cultivator, the transmission arrays he arranged could cover a range of 200 kilometers. Now that he had broken through to the fifth order and his foundation had greatly improved, the range he could cover was certainly wider. No matter what Tan Sheng and Xiao Yang planned to do, it was not a bad thing to take care of things here first. After discussing with Li Baxian for a while, Lu Ye's plans slowly became clear. Flying all the way, it was not until dusk that returning Heaven Valley came into view. After not returning for a few days, the spiritual land was unguarded. Fortunately, the spirit array Lu Yi had arranged before was still operating perfectly, so there were no signs of the spiritual land being attacked. Chapter 597. The spiritual land was unharmed. After all, this was the depths of Taimong Mountain. Even if there were cultivators passing by, with the concealment of the array set up by Lu Yi, they might not be able to detect anything. Activating the jade pendant, they each entered. The beautiful scenery was imprinted in their eyes. On the soft green grass, many wolf pups that had not yet grown up were playing around. There were not many adult wolves left in the spiritual land, only a dozen or so. When they noticed the commotion, they all looked over, but when they confirmed that it was Lu Yi and the others who had returned, they no longer paid attention to them. 4 or 5 hours later, all the wolves returned. The demon wolves could not fly, so they were much slower than Lu Yi and the others. At this moment, Lu Yi was standing in front of the Tianji pillar. His mind was connected to the Tianji treasure house, and he bought a lot of materials from the Tianji treasure house. The location of the spiritual land had been exposed. Tan Sheng and Xiao Liang would not let it go. It could be foreseen that it would not be long before the cultivators of the myriad Devil Ridge came to attack. Since they had decided to stay in the spiritual land, the necessary array needed to be set up, especially the teleportation array. Although the spiritual land had the Tianji pillar invited by Lu Yi and everyone could return to the 9 regions at any time, teleportation arrays, setting up a few was not a bad thing. After buying the materials, Lu Yi began to refine the array flags. He had just refined a lot of array flags in the Fox Immortal Valley some time ago. However, they had all been consumed. The result was to help the fox demon kill the berserk giant ape. After a few days, he began to refine the array flags again. The feeling was completely different. It was easier to refine. This was not only the result of one level of cultivation increase, but also because his mind had become stronger. The stronger the mind, the more subtle the control of spiritual power. A few days ago, he could refine 2 array flags. Now, he could refine 3. The efficiency had improved a lot. Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan were responsible for finding a suitable place to set up the teleportation array. As for the giant armor, it could not help much. It was good enough that it did not cause trouble. Since returning, it had been in a state of cultivation. While they were busy here, in another valley less than 3,000 miles away from the Huitian Valley, a large array covered it. From time to time, cultivators came in and out. This place was the Holy Eve's spiritual land. Even on the 10 maps sold by the Tianji Business Alliance, this spiritual land was marked. The Holy Eve's spiritual land had already existed in the Cloudy River battlefield for more than 20 years, and was considered one of the more famous spiritual lands in the vicinity. Compared to the spiritual land of Lu Yi and the others, the Holy Eve's spiritual land was undoubtedly a large spiritual land. After more than 20 years of development, the scale of the spiritual land had been constantly expanding. Now, the entire spiritual land had more than 100 cultivators. In the entire Cloud River battlefield, there were not many spiritual land that was larger than the Holy Eve's spiritual land. What was even rarer was that a few years ago, the Holy Eve's spiritual land had been promoted from a B-class spiritual land to a A-class spiritual land. The grade of the spiritual land could be upgraded, and the scale could also be expanded. All it needed to do was to integrate more spring spirit. Take Lu Ye's spiritual land for example. A grade spiritual land was indeed the highest grade spiritual land, but if Lu Yi could get spring spirits of other grades and place them in the spiritual spring, then although the grade of the spiritual land would not be upgraded, the scale could be expanded. The higher the grade of the spring spirit integrated, the more the scale could be expanded. In this way, it could accommodate more cultivators to stay and cultivate. Basically, the large-scale spiritual lands in the Cloudy River battlefield were developed step by step like this. Many sects had their own spiritual lands, which were passed down through generations of cultivators. This had an extremely long-term significance to the development of the sect, because as long as the cultivators of the sect reached the Cloud River realm, they could enter the spiritual land to cultivate in peace. However, for many cultivators, although it was safe to cultivate in the spiritual land, it was also a shackle. If it was too safe, there would be less struggle, and it would also cause them to lose their drive. Therefore, even if it was a sect that had a spiritual land inheritance, the cultivators would not always stay in the spiritual land. Every few days they would go out to gain experience. The Holy Eve's spiritual land was not the spiritual land of one sect, but two. One was the Sacred Flame sect, and the other was the Vast Universe sect. Both were sects of the Myriad Demon Ridge, and they were both in U Province, so they had a good relationship with each other. When their disciples arrived at the Cloudy River battlefield, they would naturally help each other. Currently, the cultivators in the Holy Eve's spiritual land were led by two Ninth Order cultivators. One was Huoliao Yuan of the Sacred Flame sect, and the other was Tu Guanxiong of the Vast Universe sect. Two Ninth Order cultivators in a spiritual land with over 100 cultivators was a very small proportion. It was not that the two sects only had two Ninth Order Cloud River realm cultivators. No matter how weak these two sects were, they were still 4th or 5th grade sects. How could they only have two Ninth Order Cloud River realm cultivators? It was just that Cloud River realm cultivators did not stay in the Cloudy River battlefield all year round, especially after their cultivation reached a high level. They would spend most of their time in the 9 provinces. Increasing their cultivation was secondary, and tempering themselves was more important. If they did not need to stay in the spiritual land and take care of their junior brothers and sisters, they would not stay in the spiritual land all year round. Even if they stayed in the spiritual land for 3 months, other Ninth Order Cloud River realm cultivators would replace them when the time was up. In the secret room, Huoliao Yuan was cultivating. Suddenly, there was a movement from the battlefield imprint. He did not check it immediately and just sat there quietly. After a stick of incense worth of time, he slowly opened his eyes and spat out a mouthful of turbid air. Lifting his hand, he touched the battlefield imprint and checked it. Huoliao Yuan's expression changed slightly. This message was sent by a junior brother of his who was traveling in the Cloudy River battlefield. The content of the message made him very interested. After thinking for a moment, he sent out a message and hurriedly got up. Walking out of the secret room, he went straight to another room. Before he knocked, the door opened by itself and a figure appeared in front of him. It was the other Ninth Order Cloud River realm cultivator in the spiritual land, Tu Guanxiong. Welcoming Huoliao Yuan in, Tu Guanxiong asked, "Senior Brother Hua, is the news reliable?" It was sent by Nanqing from the outside. "It is not conclusive, so I can't be sure," Huoliao Yuan replied. Tu Guanxiong thought for a moment and remembered who the Nanqing was. The two Ninth Order Cloud River realm cultivators in the two sects were not limited to just the two of them. Naturally, there were more than 100 Cloud River realm cultivators in the two sects. However, the spiritual land could only accommodate 100 people, so more disciples were scattered around the Cloudy River battlefield to search for opportunities on their own. Where did he get the news from? Tu Guanxiong asked again. Huoliao Yuan said, "Someone sent him a message, and the person who received the news also heard it from somewhere else. The news has been passed around a few times, so it is impossible to determine the source." "Senior Brother Hua, how credible do you think this news is? It is hard to believe any news without seeing it with your own eyes. However, since it is related to Luia, it is worth investigating. However, what I am concerned about is that the information in the news is too detailed." The information he received was not only about Lu Ye's current location, but also the various forces in the spiritual land, including the cultivation of Li Baxian and the others, as well as the large number of wolves. Senior Brother Hua, are you suspecting? Tu Guanxiong said thoughtfully. If I am not wrong, someone must have suffered a great loss at the hands of Lu Ye, but there is no hope for revenge, so they want to kill him with a borrowed knife. He paused for a moment. There are nearly 300 monster wolves. Lu Ye is not from the beast taming school, so how can he control them? Even if he was from the beast taming school, it was impossible for him to control so many monster wolves. If that is the case, we may not be able to handle it. Tu Guanxiong was worried, but he knew about the grudge between the Sacred Flame sect and the Jade Blood sect. In addition, Lu Ye had a huge bounty on his head, so he knew that Huoliao Yuan must be tempted. Otherwise, he would not have come to discuss this matter with him. Not to mention Huoliao Yuan, even Yang Kai himself was tempted. After the last hunting ground incident, Lu Ye went to the Spirit Stream battlefield and extorted a huge amount of resources from the great sects of Myriad Demon Ridge, so Myriad Demon Ridge's bounty on him had increased significantly. These days, countless people had been searching for Lu Ye's whereabouts in the Cloud River battlefield, but unfortunately, they had found nothing. No one knew where he was, but now that they knew his exact location, who wouldn't be tempted? If this news were to spread, it would only take a few days for that place to be overcrowded. The person who secretly leaked the news did not choose to spread it out, but instead accurately passed it on to the Sacred Flame sect. Obviously, he was not willing to give up. There are indeed a lot of monster wolves, but as long as we plan properly, we may have a chance to kill Lu Ye. Lu Ye was just a third-order cultivator some time ago, so even if he received the reward from the hunting grounds hunting list, his cultivation wouldn't have changed too much. Against such an enemy, as long as they found the opportunity, they could kill him in one strike. Why bother with a pack of wolves? No matter what, let's send someone to investigate first. We have to make sure the news is reliable. As for someone who wants to reap the benefits, Huoliao Yuan's eyes flashed with a trace of coldness. That depends on whether he has the ability to snatch food from the tiger's mouth. The other party was acting so sneakily, so he was obviously alone. What did they have to fear with the strength of the entire spirit land? I understand. Tu Guanxiong responded and immediately sent a message. Naturally, a ghost cultivator was needed to find someone to investigate. 99% of the Sacred Flame sect's disciples were Dharma cultivators, so they couldn't find a single ghost cultivator. They could only send someone from the Huanyu sect. Not long after, a short and thin man stepped in, Senior Brother Tu, Senior Brother Hua. Tu Guanxiong said, Yen Gui, there's a place you need to investigate. The ghost cultivator named Yen Gui said, Please tell me, Senior Brother. Returning Heaven Valley. Yen Gui took out the 10-point map and checked it. After locating the location of Returning Heaven Valley, he raised his eyebrows and said, This place is deep in the Great Mang Mountains. Senior Brothers, what's there? You'll know when you get there. Tu Guanxiong didn't say it out loud, as he was afraid of giving his junior brother a preconceived impression. Remember, investigate it carefully and pay attention to your safety. That place might be dangerous. Yen Gui didn't mind. Don't worry, Senior Brother. I'll be careful. Although his cultivation wasn't high, he was still a 7th-order Cloud River Realm cultivator. Moreover, as a ghost cultivator, he was best at hiding. Spying for information was a piece of cake for him. If you find anything, report it immediately. Yes. Yen Gui accepted the order and left. He left the room and flew up into the sky on his artifact. Chapter 598. Lu Ye's cultivation had advanced by a level, and with the benefits of the Heaven Fate baptism, the efficiency of refining array chess had greatly increased. In just 2 days, Lu Yi had nearly 300 more array flags. Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan had also found a few suitable locations to set up a transmission array. With the consumption of a large number of array flags, the array was formed one by one. Soon, the 300 array flags were all used up. On the fourth day after returning from Fox Immortal Valley, Lu Yi was refining more array flags when he suddenly raised his head and looked in a certain direction outside the spirit land. The next moment, he stood up and rushed straight out of the spirit land. The moment his figure rushed out of the protective array, the concealment and aura concealment spirit runes were already on his body. His figure quickly disappeared. Less than a mile away from the spirit land, Yen Gui hid his figure and quietly hid behind a big tree. After receiving Tu Guanxiong's order, he rushed all the way here. With his 7th order Cloud River Realm cultivation, it shouldn't have taken him 4 days to reach here. However, this place was deep in the Great Mang Mountains after all. There were many dangers along the way. Fortunately, he was a ghost cultivator and could avoid many unnecessary battles. It was just a delay in time. He had just arrived at returning Sky Valley today, but he didn't expect to trigger an alarm array not long after he arrived here. He immediately distanced himself from the alarm array and hid in the dark to observe silently. Tu Guanxiong only asked him to investigate the situation in returning Sky Valley. He didn't specify what was here, but for Tu Guanxiong and Fire Prairie to pay so much attention, it was obvious that returning Sky Valley was hiding some secrets. Since there was an alarm array, there must be someone who set up the array. Who was hiding here? Now that he had triggered the alarm array, the person who set up the array would definitely come over to investigate. When the time came, he would know. But what made him feel strange was, after waiting for a long time, there was no sign of anyone. Thousands of feet away from him, Lu Yi hid his figure and secretly observed. There were no traces of wild beasts or monster beasts around, and there was no abnormality in his field of vision. Someone had been here, and judging from the current situation, there was a high probability that it was a ghost cultivator. He rushed out the moment the array was triggered, but there was still no trace of the other party. The other party was obviously hiding. This ghost cultivator was a cautious person. Someone invited by Tan Xing and Xiaoliang? It didn't seem like it. These two knew the situation of the spirit land like the back of their hands. Why would they invite a ghost cultivator over? Was he just passing by? Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. Lu Yi moved slowly, not revealing his aura at all as he quietly scanned his surroundings. Now that his mental strength had increased significantly, even without the help of the insight spirit inscriptions, he would be able to detect any abnormalities within a radius of 300 feet. 1 cup of tea, 1 stick of incense. The game in the dark began quietly. It wasn't until nearly an hour later that Lu Yi suddenly turned his head and looked behind a large tree. Over there was something strange. With the enhancement of the insight spirit tattoo, his vision changed and colorful lights started to flow. As expected, behind the big tree, the colorful lights shuttled back and forth, outlining the outline of a short figure. He stealthily crept up. Yen Gui suddenly had a feeling of uneasiness. Although this feeling was very faint, as a ghost cultivator who often appeared in dangerous places, he had always been a cautious person. If not for this, Tu Guanxiong would not have let him come alone to investigate the situation. He immediately held his breath and concentrated, silently sensing the surroundings to search for the source of the uneasy feeling. At this moment, there was a sudden fluctuation of spiritual energy behind him. Without thinking, he hurriedly turned around and blocked the attack with the curved sword in his hand. Not far behind him, a figure had appeared out of nowhere. When the fiery red sword light slashed down, Yen Gui felt a huge force coming from the front along with the explosion of spiritual energy. He could not help but fly backward as his blood and qi surged in his chest. With his concealment broken, he was also exposed. In midair, he clearly saw the face of the person who ambushed him. With a glance, his eyes lit up and he exclaimed, Luya! So that was it. So that was it. No wonder Senior Brother Tu and Senior Brother Hua asked him to investigate the situation here. It turned out that this was where Luya was hiding. He had seen Luya's image before. The Holy Eve's spiritual land was dominated by the Sacred Fire Sect, and the Sacred Fire Sect had a deep grudge with the Jade Blood Sect. Previously, Huoliao Yuan had found an image recording stone from somewhere and recorded Luya's image. Huoliao Yuan's action was undoubtedly to let all the disciples of the Sacred Fire Sect remember Luya's appearance. Therefore, even if he had never seen Lu Yi before, Yan Gui recognized him at a glance. His heart was filled with excitement, but what followed was endless shock. A storm of saber force enveloped him as the saber light carried the aura of death. Yan Gui retreated again and again. In a short time, the web between his thumb and forefinger split open, his arm went numb, and the spiritual energy in his body surged. This guy, how is he so strong? Although he was a ghost cultivator and was not good at fighting head-on, he was still a seventh-order cultivator. The spiritual energy fluctuations from Luya were only at the fifth order, so he could not resist at all. Facing the violent saber force, he could not help but feel like he was being crushed. I'll die. This horrifying thought uncontrollably popped up in his heart. The excitement on Yan Gui's face had long disappeared, leaving only fear and panic. Lu Yi did not use his full strength when he first slashed out because he was not sure which camp this person was from. However, when Yan Gui blurted out his name, the other party's position was very clear. Since he recognized him, he naturally knew his background. If the other party was from Grand Heaven Alliance, he would take the initiative to reveal the light of his battlefield mark. If he did not, then he was from Myriad Demon Ridge. Therefore, from the second slash, Lu Yi did not hold back at all. A tearing sound rang out, accompanied by Yan Gui's scream. The clothes on his chest were torn, and a bloody wound appeared. Under the pain, Yan Gui's defense became more and more chaotic. Lu Yi took advantage of the situation and slashed down again. This time, Yan Gui was almost beheaded. Fortunately, he raised his spirit artifact at the last moment to block the attack. Even so, his body was sent flying, blood splattering in the air. Landing in a sorry state, Yan Gui did not escape immediately. Instead, he raised his hand and pressed it on his battlefield mark. He did not know why Luya was so strong, but he knew that he had been exposed. This time, he was doomed. Since that was the case, he had to send the news back no matter what. He could not die in vain. He did not even have the slightest intention of begging for mercy, because he knew that begging for mercy would only bring him greater humiliation and torture. However, in the next moment, his heart violently contracted, and his strength and vitality rapidly dissipated. Looking down, he saw a flaming long saber piercing his chest. The violent spirit energy exploded in his body, causing him to vomit blood and stagger. The light in his eyes quickly dimmed. When Lu Yi pulled out his saber, his body fell forward. Shaking off the blood on the mountain coiling saber, Lu Yi sheathed it. A red light flew out from the corpse of the ghost cultivator in front of him and landed on the back of Lu Ye's hand like a firefly. Frowning at the corpse in front of him, Lu Yi suddenly realized that he seemed to have underestimated his current strength. Even if the other party was a ghost cultivator who was not good at fighting head-on, he was still a seventh-order realm cultivator. Facing his current strength, he could not resist at all. Thinking back to the seventh-order weapon cultivator in the hunting ground, he had gone all out against Li Ba Xian and Feng Yuchan. In the end, if he had not successfully activated his beast transformation secret technique, it was obvious who would have won. In just 2 months, the seventh-order weapon cultivator who could force the three of them to go all out could not even last 30 breaths in front of him. The growth of his strength could be described as earth-shattering. Of course, in the hunting ground, he was only a third-order Cloud River realm cultivator. Although it had only been 2 months, His cultivation had jumped 2 minor realms, reaching the 5th order Cloud River realm. But it was undeniable that the Heaven's Fate baptism in the altar of Fox Immortal Valley had strengthened his foundation by a lot. Especially the increase in the flow of spirit energy in his body. The faster the spirit energy in a cultivator's body flowed, the stronger the strength he could erupt with. Li Ba-Xian and Feng Yuchan arrived together. Seeing the corpse in front of them, Li Ba-Xian asked, "What happened?" Lu Yi said, "Someone came to spy on the situation." Li Ba-Xian frowned. "Xiaoliang? Tanxing?" But then he denied it. "That's not right. They know the situation of the spirit land very well. There's no need for them to send someone to spy on it. Are they just passing by?" "It doesn't seem like it." Lu Yi shook his head. If he was just passing by, there was no reason for him to accurately locate Huitian Valley. Recalling the ghost cultivator's reaction when he saw Lu Ye's appearance, Lu Yi felt that this ghost cultivator was sent here to gather information without knowing anything. Lu Yi raised his hand and with a surge of spirit energy, he grabbed the 2 storage bags on the corpse. In just a moment, the seal on the storage bags was opened. Lu Yi rummaged through them and soon found a jade token that looked like an identity card. On the front, there was a picture of a palace with a big word engraved in the middle of the palace. Huan. Looking at the back, it should be the name of the dead ghost cultivator, Yan Gui. Lu Yi threw the jade token to Li Ba-Xian. Li Ba-Xian looked at it and said thoughtfully, "It might be someone from Huan Yu sect." Huan Yu sect. Lu Yi thought carefully and reluctantly remembered that this should be a 5th-rank sect. When he was in the inner circle of the battlefield, he saw this sect's encampment marked on the map. Holy Eve's spiritual land. Li Ba-Xian murmured again. "What?" Li Ba-Xian took out the map and checked it. He frowned and said, "If it's someone from Huan Yu sect, then he might be from Holy Eve's spiritual land." Holy Eve's spiritual land is a spiritual land shared by Huan Yu sect and another force from Wanmo Ridge. It's a large spiritual land and is marked on the map. It's only 2,000 to 3,000 miles away from us. 2,000 to 3,000 miles was undoubtedly a very long distance for Spirit Stream Realm cultivators. But for Cloud River Realm cultivators, it was nothing. With Lu Ye's current speed, even if he flew at full speed, it would only take about a day. Chapter 599. Little junior brother should be familiar with the other force from Myriad Demon Ridge. Which one? Sacred Flame Sect. Lu Yi was not unfamiliar with this force. The first time he came into contact with them, they had left a deep impression on Lu Yi. It was at the Golden Dome of the Spirit Stream battlefield. His last battle was against a Sacred Flame Sect Saintess who had broken her spirit aperture and dropped her cultivation from the 7th order to the 6th order. That battle could be said to be extremely tragic. In the end, both sides were like oil lamps that ran out of oil. In the end, he used up the last bit of spirit energy in his body. He had to use the Fire Phoenix technique to kill her. Later, in the inner circle of the battlefield, when the Grand Heaven Alliance Coalition Army was formed, Lu Yi deliberately led the Coalition Army to break into Sacred Flame Sect's encampment because Big Senior Sister said that Sacred Flame Sect and Blue Blood Sect had a great grudge. Suddenly, someone suspected to be from Universe Sect appeared here, and 2,000 or 3,000 kilometers away, there was a Holy Eve's spirit land jointly controlled by Sacred Flame Sect and Universe Sect. Li Ba-Xian couldn't help but make a lot of connections. If this person is really from Holy Eve's spirit land, then we may have a lot of trouble in the near future, Li Ba-Xian said. Without mentioning anything else, such a large first-grade sect had been beaten to the point where it dropped in rank and only recovered to rank 4 today. This kind of hatred could not be resolved. Once the people of the Sacred Flame Sect knew of Lu Ye's current position, they would definitely take action. Let's act according to the circumstances, Lu Ye's eyes flashed. He originally thought that with a spiritual land, he would be able to cultivate in peace with Li Ba-Xian and the others, but who would have thought that things would not go as he wished? Not long after, Xiaoliang, Tanxing, and the others had attacked, and now, he might be targeted by the Holy Eve's spiritual land. Lu Yi didn't panic. The spirit land had the Heaven's Fate Pillar he invited, and there were many spirit arrays and wolf packs guarding it. The worst outcome was nothing more than the spirit land being destroyed. He, Li Baxian, and the others would be forced to return to the 9 provinces. Did this person send a message before he died? Li Baxian asked. Lu Yi nodded, yes. But whether it was successful or not, I don't know. When the guy named Yan Gui sensed that something was wrong, he suddenly raised his hand and touched his battlefield mark. Although Lu Yi quickly killed him, Lu Yi didn't know whether he succeeded or not. Let's prepare for the worst and make the most appropriate response, Li Baxian said, and the 3 of them quickly returned to the spiritual land. Hu Po was sleeping soundly. The reason for this was because Lu Yi had fed him the demonic core of the overlord-level demonic beast. He had already opened the storage pouch he got from the fox demon. His harvest was quite bountiful. Just the Yao cores alone numbered in the hundreds. Thinking about how the fox demoness had been domineering in Fox Immortal Valley for 20 years, it was not surprising that she had accumulated so many demon cores. Hu Po had consumed many monster cores in the past, but he had never had much of a reaction. This time, after swallowing the monster core of the berserk giant ape, he fell into a deep sleep not long after. It was obvious that the monster core contained too much power, and Hu Po needed to sleep to refine it. This caused Yi to enter a state of silence as well. However, Lu Yi was looking forward to it. With Hu Po's strange reaction this time, Hu Po would definitely reap a lot of benefits when he woke up. Perhaps he could even break through again. Holy Eve's spiritual land. Tu Guanxiong suddenly felt a reaction from the battlefield imprint and hurriedly checked it. He found that it was a message from Yan Gui, who had left a few days ago. The message was very simple and only had 3 words. Lu Yi. It was not that Yan Gui did not want to send more messages, but there was no time. Sending these 3 words was already his limit. Moreover, just as Tu Guanxiong finished checking this unclear information, Yan Gui's battlefield imprint completely disappeared. Tu Guanxiong's face changed drastically. The disappearance of the battlefield imprint undoubtedly meant that Yan Gui had fallen. This was something he never expected. Yan Gui was a 7th-order cultivator, and as a ghost cultivator, he was best at concealment. As long as he did not expose himself, even if he encountered a 9th-order Cloud River Realm cultivator, he would not be in too much danger. This was also the reason why he was relieved to let Yan Gui go. He only went to Returning Sky Valley to investigate the situation, so how could he have fallen? However, the last message from Yan Gui undoubtedly stated that he had seen Lu Yi. In other words, the information Huoliao Prairie obtained before was true. Lu Yi was in Returning Sky Valley. Damn it! Tu Guanxiong gritted his teeth. His junior brother's inexplicable death pained him greatly. Suppressing the grief in his heart, Tu Guanxiong walked out of the room and found Huoliao Prairie. He told him about Yan Gui's encounter. Huoliao Prairie was astonished. Yan Gui is dead? Tu Guanxiong replied in a deep voice, he's dead. The disappearance of the battlefield imprint was the most conclusive proof. Huoliao Prairie's mouth twitched, but he could only say in the end, my condolences. Yan Gui can't die in vain, Tu Guanxiong said coldly. Huoliao Prairie nodded, of course not. Since Lu Yi is in Returning Sky Valley, I'll bring some people to kill him. Since the information about Lu Yi in Returning Sky Valley is true, the rest shouldn't be false. A few hundred monster wolves are not easy to deal with. Brother Hua, we may not be able to succeed with fewer people. Huoliao Prairie nodded. Don't worry, I'll send a message to the nearby disciples of Sacred Flame sect to gather at Returning Sky Valley. In addition, I'll bring half of the people from the Spirit Land with me. Half of the cultivators from the spiritual land would be 50 people. If the cultivators gathered by the Sacred Flame sect were included, they could easily form a lineup of 100 people. Such a lineup could deal with the Huitian Valley, if the information they had was correct. Bring 70%. Tu Guanxiong said, since we're going to attack, we'll crush them with absolute power. Huoliao Prairie wanted to say that there was no need, but seeing the hatred in Tu Guanxiong's eyes, he finally nodded. Then I'll listen to Brother Tuesday. I'll kill Luye with my own hands and bring his head back. Tu Guanxiong said, Brother Hua, don't be careless. Last time in the hunting ground, Luye used the divine pillar to escape back to the 9 states. Now, he may be able to use the divine pillar again. I've heard about what happened in the hunting ground. The biggest reason he could escape back then was not the divine pillar, but the golden body token's protection. This time, he doesn't have the golden body token. Even if he uses the divine pillar, he may not be able to escape back to the 9 states. As Huoliao Prairie said this, a cold smile appeared on his face. Moreover, Brother Tu, don't forget that I still have that thing. As long as I find a chance, he'll definitely die. Tu Guanxiong was startled at first, but then he seemed to remember something and nodded. That's true, but it's a waste to use it on Luye. I'll act according to the situation. Brother Tu, just wait for my good news. After making his decision, Huoliao Prairie immediately took action. Those who were not cultivating in seclusion in the spiritual land were immediately gathered, and 70% of them were taken. Then, Huoliao Prairie continuously sent messages to the outside world, gathering the disciples of the Sacred Flame sect who were scattered outside and gathering them at the periphery of the Taimong Mountains. After only an hour, a huge spirit boat took to the air and flew in the direction of the Taimong Mountains. In the spiritual stream battlefield, such large spirit boats that could carry many cultivators were not rare, especially in the inner and core circles. Basically, every sect had one. Although such a large spirit boat could not fly as fast as a small flying spirit boat, it was not much slower. It was a necessary tool for a sect or a force to travel. However, in the Cloud River battlefield, this kind of large-scale flying spirit tool was very rare. This was because Cloud River tier cultivators rarely gathered in large groups. Only a few large-scale spiritual lands would be equipped with such a flying spirit tool in case of emergency. Tu Guanxiong watched as the spirit boat left. Although he wanted to take revenge personally, someone had to stay in the spiritual land. Between him and Huoliao Prairie, one of them had to stay behind. Moreover, Huoliao Prairie still had that thing, so he could only let Huoliao Prairie lead the way. When the spirit boat set off, there were 2 pairs of eyes watching silently from dozens of miles away. They were Xiao Yang and Tan Xing. After a few days of recuperation, the 2 of them had basically recovered. Brother Xia's prediction is amazing. As expected, the Holy Eve's spiritual land could not hold back and made a big move. Moreover, it seems that the news has not been completely leaked. Xiao Yang snorted. Wealth moves people's hearts. How could they bear to let the news leak? When the time comes, everyone will want a piece of the pie. Let's go too? Let's go. The 2 of them did not follow behind the spirit boat of the Holy Eve's spiritual land. After all, they already knew the location of Huitian Valley, so they could arrive there first and wait quietly. In the spiritual land it was quiet. Li Baxian and the others were cultivating. Hupo was still in a deep sleep. Lu Yi held a broken arrow in his hand, turning it over and over to examine it. This broken arrow was Wei Kei's. When he was about to die, he used this broken arrow. Its power was so great that even the body of the giant armor could not withstand the damage of this broken arrow and was directly pierced through. Afterward, Lu Yi and Li Baxian chased after the heavily injured Tan Xing and Xiao Liang. Feng Yuechan stayed behind to look after the giant armor and put away the broken arrow. This thing looked quite old. It was unknown where Wei Kei found it. However, according to Feng Yuechan, this broken arrow was a rare treasure. The so-called exotic treasure was a treasure whose quality could not be judged by ordinary rules. For example, the golden body token used by Lu Yi in the hunting ground, or even the tracing disc used by Tan Xing to track his position, were rare treasures. There were many exotic treasures in the 9 continents. Most of them came from secret realms, and some were bestowed by the heavens. However, as long as it was related to exotic treasures, it could not be judged by common sense. They often had all kinds of strange functions. Take this broken arrow for example. According to Lu Ye's investigation, there were not many barriers on it. At most, it was equivalent to a top-grade spirit artifact. However, there was no top-grade spirit artifact that could display such powerful killing power. One had to know that even the giant armor's protection could not block this broken arrow. Moreover, this was only a broken arrow. It was hard to imagine what kind of power it could display if it was complete. There was a crack on the broken arrow, so it shouldn't be used much more than a few times. The reason why Feng Yuchan gave it to Lu Yi was because the amount of spirit qi required to activate it was simply too great. Even with her 6th order Cloud River Realm cultivation, if she really wanted to activate the power of this broken arrow, she would have to exhaust all of her spirit qi. Therefore, it was difficult for this thing to display its power in her hand. Chapter 600. Wei Kei was a 9th order Cloud River Realm cultivator, so he had much more spirit energy than Feng Yuechan. If he had any other choice, he would not have used the broken arrow. First of all, every time he used this treasure, he would be closer to being completely destroyed, so he was reluctant to use it. Second of all, it would consume too much spirit energy. Once he used it, it would either kill his enemy or himself. But he never expected that he would die even if he was forced to use this treasure. Lu Ye's cultivation base was 1 level lower than Feng Yuechan's. Under normal circumstances, he wouldn't be able to activate this treasure. However, he still had a spirit storage ring on his finger, which was something he had bought specifically for the Fire Phoenix spirit pattern. After so many days, the spirit power stored in the spirit storage ring had reached an extremely high level, which was enough to activate the power of the broken arrow once. It was for this reason that Feng Yuechan gave the broken arrow to Lu Yi. Refining the broken arrow was not difficult. According to the quality of spirit artifacts, it was only equivalent to a top-grade spirit artifact. Lu Yi only spent half a day to refine it. Strictly speaking, this thing was equivalent to an imperial artifact, but it was slightly more powerful. Now that the spirit land could be attacked at any time, having an additional means like this would increase their strength. Several leisurely days passed in the blink of an eye, and everything was calm. Lu Yi almost thought that Yen Gui, who was killed by him, was really just passing by. Until one day, a huge shadow covered the sky outside the spirit land, followed by a few probing attacks that bombarded the array. In the empty valley, layers of ripples suddenly appeared, revealing the location of the array. Search. Lu Yi immediately dashed out of the house and looked over. Not far away there was a huge spirit boat floating in the air. On the spirit boat there were several figures looking down. On the front of the spirit boat, there was a blazing flame symbol that was extremely eye-catching. They still came. Li Baxian's sigh came from the side. The worst scenario had come true. Lu Yi stared at the flame symbol. How could he not know that it was the Sacred Flame Sect? The Sacred Flame Sect cultivators had such a symbol on their foreheads, so it was easy to distinguish. If there were only the 4 of them in the spiritual land, they could only use the Tianji pillar to return to the 9 state. However, with the help of the wolf pack, they might be able to resist the attack of the Sacred Flame Sect. Lu Yi didn't rely too much on the cultivation environment, but this grade A spirit land could make cultivation easier for Li Baxian and the others. They might not be able to obtain such a spirit land in the future, so they had to try their best to keep it. Senior brother, there's a formation below. Looking at the scale, it's very likely to be a spiritual land. On the spirit boat, a cultivator came to Huo Liao Yuan's side and reported with a slightly excited expression. Huo Liao Yuan looked down indifferently without making a sound. It had to be said that the concealment formation set up here was extremely ingenious. If he hadn't obtained accurate information in advance, he might not have paid attention to this valley even if he was passing by. However, after a few probing attacks, the formation here had been exposed. This meant that the information he received was true. Luya was hiding here. He stepped out of the spirit boat and stood in the air, displaying his might. He slowly said, "Luya, do you want to come out yourself or do you want me to drag you out?" His voice wasn't loud, but it was enough to spread throughout the entire Huitian Valley under the influence of spiritual power. There was a commotion on the spirit boat. Luya? Although they had followed Huoliao Yuan all the way here, they didn't know why. Huoliao Yuan had never explained the purpose of this trip to any of the cultivators. When they saw that there was a formation here that seemed to be a spiritual land, many of the cultivators thought that Huoliao Yuan was here to plunder the spring spirit. They had done this many times over the years. Otherwise, the Holy Eve's spiritual land wouldn't have been able to expand into a Grade A spirit land. However, when the name Luya reached their ears, everyone seemed to have woken up from a dream. Not only could there be a spiritual land here, but the famous Luya was also hiding here. In an instant, the cultivators of the Holy Eve's spiritual land were excited. To the cultivators of the Myriad Demon Ridge, Luya's name meant unimaginable wealth. When they looked in the direction of the spiritual land, everyone's eyes were filled with fervor. Especially the cultivators of the Sacred Flame sect, their eyes were burning like flames. To the people of the Sacred Flame sect, Luya was not only a bounty target with a huge amount of wealth, but also a disciple of the Jade Blood sect who had caused their sect's grade to drop. Even if there was no bounty, they would definitely kill Luya if they met him in the wild. Huoliao Yuan's voice echoed in the valley, but there was no response. Even the formation below didn't change at all. Stubborn. Huoliao Yuan snorted coldly. He raised a hand and gently put it down. He said, "Surround him." On the spirit boats, figures darted out one after another and surrounded the spiritual land in the blink of an eye. In the spiritual land, Li Baxian looked at the many figures above with a grave expression. The number of enemies was much greater than he had imagined. There were a total of 150 to 160 people. The Holy Eve's spiritual land had sent out 70 people. Previously, Huoliao Yuan had sent a message to the nearby disciples of the Sacred Flame sect to gather at the periphery of the Taimong Mountain. If not for the lack of time, more people would have come. Such a force was not something the spiritual land's current defenses could contend against. Although there were more wolves, they couldn't fly. Their role in the battle against the cultivators was greatly reduced. With the power of the spiritual land, resisting 100 people was the limit. 150 to 160 people was simply impossible. It seemed that the Sacred Flame sect already knew the situation of the spiritual land like the back of their hand. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sent out so many people. Xiaoliang, Tanxing, these two guys really did a lot of harm. Just as he was about to persuade Luya to return to the 9 states, he turned his head and saw that Luya's expression was calm without any worry. He swallowed his words and asked suspiciously, "Little junior brother seems to have a countermeasure?" Luya shook his head and said, "Different situations call for different measures." Li Baxian thought for a moment and said, "Don't force it. If the situation is not right, return to the 9 states immediately." "I understand." At the same time, in another direction, Xiaoliang and Tanxing were also quietly watching. However, when the Holy Eve's spiritual land completely set up their formation, their expressions darkened instead of being happy. "This is bad." Tanxing frowned. "Huoliao Yuan, this trash, brought so many people here. Instead of breaking the formation, they are showing off. Luya must have run away." Xiaoliang was puzzled. How did the Holy Eve's spiritual land get so many people? The reason why he chose to send the news to the Holy Eve's spiritual land was mainly to kill with a borrowed knife. In his imagination, the Holy Eve's spiritual land would send out 70 to 80% of their people after receiving news of Luia. When the time came, they would fight with Luia and he would benefit from it. However, the development of the situation was obviously not right. With so many people from the Holy Eve's spiritual land, as long as Luia's brain was not kicked by a donkey, he would definitely run away immediately. Why would he stay here and wait for death? Luia's spiritual land had a Tianji pillar. Lui had noticed this the last time he came here with Tan Xing and Wei Quebec. A Tianji pillar was worth 100,000 merit points. Lui had managed to obtain one in the hunting ground, and now he had managed to obtain another one in the spiritual land. Luia's wealth was both enviable and hateful. Only an evenly matched fight would give Luia hope, and he would not escape with the help of the Tianji pillar. With such a lineup from the Holy Eve's spiritual land, how could there be any Luia in the spiritual land? He was afraid that it was already empty inside. He was secretly annoyed. If he had known, he would have sent the news of the divine pillar to the Holy Eve's spiritual land as well. This way they would have been more careful. Just as he was secretly annoyed, Liao Yuan raised his hand slightly and waved it down slowly. A cold word popped out of his mouth: "Kill!" In an instant, the light of many imperial artifacts and spells appeared and bombarded the location of the spirit array with great momentum. Ripples spread out and the light curtain of the spirit array appeared in front of everyone. Under such attacks, the concealment spirit array arranged by Luia also lost its effect. The concealment spirit array itself did not have any defensive or offensive capabilities. The function of this spirit array was just a layer of camouflage that could hide the existence of the entire spiritual land. Even if someone were to pass by, they would not be able to detect anything without careful inspection. The few probing attacks from the Holy Eve's spiritual land just now were not enough to break the concealment spirit array's effect. Now that they were attacking together, how could the concealment spirit array hold up? The protective light curtain that enveloped the entire spiritual land appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Through the light curtain, the situation of the spiritual land was clear at a glance. The existence of many monster wolves immediately attracted the attention of the cultivators from the Holy Eve's spiritual land. Many people were shocked and could not understand how there could be so many monster wolves here. In particular, they could feel monster chi fluctuations from a few monster wolves that were comparable to Cloud River Realm 8th or 9th order cultivators. At this moment, these demonic wolves were all looking up at the sky. Although they were demonic beasts, they did not make any noise. Not even a single wolf howl could be heard. They were like a well-trained army, quietly hibernating and withdrawing their fangs and claws. The others from the Holy Eve's spiritual land did not know the situation inside the spiritual land, but Liao Yuan was very clear about it. But after verifying the accuracy of the information with his own eyes, he could not help but be shocked. Could Luia really control so many monster beasts? He had heard that he had a little white beast by his side, but it was too exaggerated for a Cloud River Realm cultivator to control so many monster beasts. He secretly rejoiced that he did not underestimate the other party and instead brought out enough strength to crush them. Otherwise, it would have been difficult to deal with this situation. After the initial panic, the cultivators from the Holy Eve's spiritual land slowly calmed down. The strength of their lineup gave them the confidence to deal with these monster wolves. Moreover, these monster wolves did not seem to be able to fly. As long as they were careful enough, they would not be a big threat. Chapter 601. Luia didn't run away, Tan Xing exclaimed. Everyone thought that after the Holy Eve's spiritual land showed enough power, Luia would definitely use the Pillar of Divine Secrets to escape back to the 9 regions. Unexpectedly, he did not leave. At this moment, he was standing in the spiritual land, looking up at the sky. There was not even the slightest bit of panic on his face. That was strange. However, Tan Xing was happy to see this. If Luia didn't run away, then there was hope to kill him. It seems that he won't give up this spiritual land unless he has no other choice, Xiaoliang said calmly. Class a spiritual land was very valuable. Even if it was only a small spiritual land, it wasn't something that ordinary people could own. No one would give it up so easily. This is going to be a good show. Tan Xing grinned. He hid the Tianji pillar. Xiaoliang looked at a certain spot in the spiritual land. The last time he came here with Tan Xing, the Tianji pillar was there. However, looking at it now, the Tianji pillar was empty. Clearly, it was hidden by an array. Hiding the divine pillar was obviously to hide its existence. What was Lu Ye trying to do? Xiaoliang seemed to have thought of something and was slightly moved. If things were really as he thought, then Lu Ye was too bold. In the air, Lu Ye's figure was reflected in Huo Liaoyuan's eyes when the concealment formation lost its effect. Even though it was their first time meeting, Huo Liaoyuan still recognized him at first glance. His blazing eyes stared coldly at the figure below as if he was looking at a dead man. Boom, boom, boom. Continuous sounds were heard. Along with the chaos of spiritual energy, the cultivators of the Holy Eve's spiritual land attacked the spiritual land's protective array. The scene of more than 150 cultivators attacking at the same time was spectacular. Even though their cultivation bases were uneven, it still caused the colorful lights to be dazzling. Their power was monstrous, and the light screen of the protective formation dimmed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Then, it began to tremble. Xiaoliang, who had been watching this scene in the dark, frowned. The situation didn't seem to be right. This defensive array was a little too weak. The last time he came here with Xiaoliang and Wei Kei, they had also attacked the defensive formation here. However, the strength of the formation at that time was much stronger than it was now. Was it because of the rearrangement? Before he could figure it out, the protective formation shattered with a loud bang. The fluorescent light drifted all over the sky, and the entire spiritual land was completely exposed to the vision of the cultivators of the Holy Eve's spiritual land. A large number of cultivators were like cats that had smelled the scent of fish. They immediately rushed forward and poured into the spiritual land. Streams of qi locked onto Lu Yi and the others from afar, bursting with killing intent. At this moment, Lu Yi, who had been standing motionless in place, moved. He took out a large array jade pendant from his bosom and poured his spiritual power into it. In the next moment, a layer of light that was even more dazzling than the formation suddenly appeared out of thin air and quickly enveloped the entire spiritual land. After the first floor, it was the second floor, however. The second floor's light curtain was vaguely different from the first floor. However, the sudden change made the cultivators of the Holy Eve's spiritual land unable to distinguish it at all. The cultivators who hadn't rushed into the spiritual land bumped into the light curtain and stopped one after another, revealing a look of astonishment. Generally speaking, there would only be one protective formation set up in a place. This was because the protective strength of the formation was directly related to the spiritual power stored on a daily basis. Even if a second one was set up, if it couldn't store too much spiritual power, it wouldn't be of much use. Instead, it would share the power of the formation. Moreover, if the invaders had the ability to break the first formation, they would certainly have the ability to break the second one. Therefore, instead of sharing the power and increasing the risk for no reason, it was better to concentrate the power in one place. However, Lu Ye's spiritual land had two protective formations. The power of the second formation was even more powerful than the first one. Xiaoliang's previous guess came true. He couldn't help but exclaim in a low voice, "This guy is so vicious." Tan Xing frowned. "Brother Xia, what did you see?" Xiaoliang said, "The first layer of the protective formation is just a pretense to show the enemy that it's weak. The second layer is the real protective formation." No wonder the protective formation just now gave off a very weak feeling. It was Lu Ye's intention. The Holy Eve's spiritual land was in trouble. More than 150 cultivators were now divided into two groups by the protective formation. One group had more than 70 cultivators, and they were inside the formation. The other group had less than 80 cultivators, and they were outside the formation. This sudden change shocked many of the cultivators. However, they quickly calmed down. This was because, under Huoliao Yuan's lead, they were attacking with absolute power. No matter what the enemy did, it was just a last-ditch struggle. Only Huoliao Yuan frowned. He felt an inexplicable sense of uneasiness in his heart, as if something bad was about to happen. There was no need for him to give the order. The cultivators outside the formation attacked the formation once again. Since they had the ability to break the first protective formation, they naturally had the ability to break the second one. Although they had lost nearly half of their manpower, it would just take them a little more time. Inside the formation, more than 70 cultivators ignored the dense pack of demon wolves below. They all stared at Liu Ye and the others. They all flew forward, and when they were at a suitable distance, they circulated their spiritual energy and were about to attack. Liu Ye grabbed an array flag and looked up at the sky. He waved the array flag in his hand lightly. Sky restriction. The space of the entire spiritual land seemed to distort at this moment, and in the next moment, the uninvited guests who had intruded into the spiritual land all revealed looks of shock and bewilderment as they screamed and fell from the air. At this moment, everyone felt as if a huge mountain was pressing down on them. It was so heavy that they couldn't breathe. When the sudden change occurred, Xiao Yang and Tan Xing, who were hiding in the dark, felt their eyelids twitch. They had suffered from the sky restriction formation before, and now that they thought about it, they couldn't help but feel a lingering fear. Huoliao Yuan's eyes widened in anger as he exclaimed, "Sky restriction formation? How could it be a sky restriction formation? How could there be a sky restriction formation?" Although he had long heard that Liu Ye of the Jade Blood Sect had extremely high attainments in Array Dao, he was only a Cloud River cultivator. How could he have the ability to set up a sky restriction formation? One had to know that even an ordinary true lake cultivator might not be able to set up such a formation. Moreover, there was no information about a sky restriction formation in the information he received. Did the person who passed on the information intentionally hide this matter? Many thoughts flashed through his mind. Huoliao Yuan was no longer as calm as before. His body turned into a fiery light as he rushed forward and shouted, "Quickly break the formation!" Nearly half of the people were trapped in the formation. Under the sky restriction formation, everyone was falling. The situation was unprecedentedly bad. Before he brought people here, he had never thought that such an inconceivable thing would happen. As his voice fell, shrill cries of agony rang out one after another. Dazzling sword lights flashed through the spiritual land. The power of powerful spells began to be released. Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan had made their move. Wherever the sword lights and spells passed, blood splattered and life dissipated. One by one, the cultivators of the Holy Eve's spiritual land lost their lives before they even landed on the ground. In just an instant, 5 or 6 people died on the spot. Giant armor charged out and leaped dozens of feet into the air. It punched the head of an unsteady Sacred Fire Sect cultivator. This Dharma cultivator did not even make a sound before his head exploded like a watermelon. Giant armor charged out of the blood mist and locked onto its second target. That cultivator was instantly frightened out of his wits. The wolf pack, which had remained motionless all this time, suddenly sprang into action. Their vigorous bodies dashed forward, and their snow-white fur fluttered in the wind. Some of the demon wolves opened their mouths as they dashed forward, shooting out green crescent-shaped wind blades, which left behind dark red marks on the bodies of their enemies. However, there were not many demon wolves that could use wind blades to attack. Most of the demon wolves directly pounced on the unsteady cultivators, biting and scratching them. The screams became even more intense and mournful. Outside the formation, the cultivators of the Holy Eve's spiritual land, led by Huoliao Yuan, felt as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. They had originally thought that they had an absolute advantage and could crush the enemy in this battle, but it had unfolded in such an unacceptable situation. Seeing familiar faces dying one after another in front of their eyes and being torn to pieces, the anger and sorrow in everyone's hearts erupted like a volcano. "Run!" someone shouted. The cultivators who were lucky enough to survive woke up from a dream and fled outside. Some people managed to escape to the edge of the formation with great difficulty, only to find in despair that they could not escape at all. There was a thick light screen in front of them, blocking their hopes of escaping. The formation had 2 layers. The first layer was the defensive formation, and the second layer was the entrapment formation. From the moment these cultivators stepped into the spiritual land, they were destined to not have a good ending. "Don't come over!" The cultivators who fled to the edge of the formation screamed in horror. They only had time to wave the spiritual weapon in their hands before they were drowned by the figures of more than 10 demon wolves. The sound of flesh being torn apart could be heard, making one's hair stand on end. Xiao Yang and Tan Xing's eyelids twitched wildly. Not to mention the people of the Holy Eve's spiritual land, even they did not expect the situation to unfold like this. They thought that Luye would use the Pillar of Tianji to escape back to the 9 regions the moment he saw the Holy Eve's spiritual land attacking. However, the result was that the Holy Eve's spiritual land suffered heavy losses. From the beginning to the end, Luye only activated the jade pendant and waved the array flag in his hand. The effect that a powerful array cultivator could bring to bear in such a situation was actually so terrifying. Boom, 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 loud noises suddenly came from all over the spiritual land. The cultivators who were fleeing in all directions had inadvertently triggered the explosion array set up by Luye. Flames surged, spiritual energy went berserk, and screams were drowned out. In just a dozen breaths of time, more than half of the cultivators in the spiritual land were dead or injured. The remaining cultivators were all shrouded in an aura of despair. Li Baxian, Feng Yuechan, and Giant Armor charged in from 3 directions, causing even more casualties to the Holy Eve's spiritual land.